All right, we are recording, so we're safe that way. Only 2 more chances to screw up recording, so hopefully we'll get all 30 of these nicely recorded and good. I guess if people are hearing this on the replay, they know that it worked. All right, yeah, let's get the party started. Okay, we'll be talking about strategy and business strategy today. Again, I don't know. I'm not going for blowing people's minds with all new stuff or anything like that necessarily. But we'll see. All right, put some extra stuff on this slide right before, and I'm not going to spend too long on this slide, but just to set the stage as we talk about strategy. This is maybe a little bit of an oversimplification or maybe just one angle on things, but still I think it'll be helpful for you to refer to. I wrote that strategy isn't primarily about making a clever plan or seeing a zillion moves ahead. And so instead, I've repeated this before, of course, several times, but I look at strategy as being about the alternative use of resources, which constantly reminds us that we need to, I'm going off the script for a second here, but when we remind ourselves that the idea of alternative use of resources, then that opens or keeps us pointed in the right direction. I was going to say it opens us up in the right way, but it opens us up to asking questions about, all right, well, that means I need to know what it is my objective is, right? And as I wrote down here, if I have multiple objectives, and when people are doing a business venture, then something I've also referred to many times throughout Alchemy, but because it's so very important, is that, and it'll help explain why people make so many odd decisions and go about their business ventures in such an odd way sometimes. It's because they're really trying to prove something, typically, in addition to whatever their venture is supposed to do and basically make them money, right, while helping people, or at least while not violating their contracts, right, at least upholding your offer. So we're basically trying at least not to trample on people's property rights while we make money. And then we have a specific objective. We have a specific idea in any particular venture, right? But then people's actions, if that was true, a lot of people's actions regarding business would be inexplicable. And to explain it, we can understand that really they're often trying to prove something to themselves without being aware of it. It's just like people are like a fish in water, where they're trying to prove that they're already smart, or they'll do like a lot of what'll look like business planning will be like, oh, well, if we make this many sales of this product, then we'll make such and such a money, and here's what our costs are. And if we run these ads, and if we convert at such and such %, then, again, we'll make this many sales, and so forth. And that's not really a plan, right? I mean, that's just playing around with random numbers. There's nothing wrong with doing that as part of your thinking at some point, just to get a sense of capacity, getting some general sense of what it might be worth spending or anything like that, right? But that's not a plan, and it's not a business model or whatever. But often plans look like that type of thing, or what people call plans. And so often people say, oh, well, I'm hoping to get this many sales, or I'm expecting this many sales, or or anything, something like that. Or I'm hoping that this person will become my client, or I'm hoping to charge this much, I'm hoping they'll accept. And again, that's not a plan, right? Hoping for something isn't a plan. And then I also see people, they'll have some success, or even when they're getting started, they might have a bunch of employees and be thinking about scaling up and have these kind of big ideas. And again, it won't be a plan if we think in terms of, all right, what are we really trying to accomplish here? And then I realized, I was talking to my wife a week or two ago and going over the idea of semi-soft locks, and I realized that I wanted to make sure to cover it again kind of clearly with you guys and from a slightly different angle. But we want to think in terms of strategy, regardless of plan anyway. Plan will emerge. But we don't start like with a plan or what's the plan. We start with this idea of strategy, and we need to have a framework for figuring out what's important. Once we understand what's important, then we're in great shape. And it's something that our brains tend to be pretty bad at, unless, well, our brains tend to be bad at our minds also at breaking a frame, right, that's kind of given to us. If people are given a game or a situation or a business situation where the frame is fine and they're just trying to maximize things within that frame, then our minds are pretty good at that. But often it's not, that isn't set for people. It's not defined and clear. And therefore, to figure out importance, we need to do something that our minds won't do very naturally. And you're going to have, like, what you're going to want to watch out for, anything that's like a red flag where you're trying to prove something, right? You want to have a clear, you want to start with one objective, and then you narrow it down to figure out what's going to be a semi-soft lock, what's going to be the right target to go for that is going to get you properly ahead, but that's going to be very doable if you focus on it. It's going to be a semi-soft lock that I'll get to. So if you're trying to make a certain amount, if you're trying to make money in general, then I've given you kind of a set of things that helps you narrow down importance. I've talked to you previously about you need to get your stable, a plan for your stable base taken care of. And until and unless you do that, then there is the importance. I've helped you set the framework with you there. And that's your strategy or your meta strategy, or me doing it with you, or me being a strategist really helping you. Instead of saying, well, here's a business blueprint, go do it, or whatever, that's like a plan. Strategy is determining, all right, what's our real objective that we want to hit in order, because we can't figure out importance. We can't figure out how to use our resources unless we figure out the objective and unless we declutter all the rest of the objectives. People will say, oh, maybe I want to make a certain amount per month, or I want to make this much money, or they'll say, I want to make this type of business work, or I want to make this many sales, or I want to get a client, or whatever it might be. Well, you can't figure out if that's a good objective, or in one sense a good strategy, right? The word strategy kind of has different shades of meaning. Unless you figure out something that's foundational. And people ask me, well, what's foundational? Something like a stable base you need to have in life. That's plenty foundational, because you can say, you can use the law of non-contradiction and say, well, how about if I don't have a stable base? I don't know what I'm going to eat my next meal. I don't know, or I can pay the rent this month, but I don't know how I'm going to pay it in 3 months. Or, you know, if your stable amount of survival isn't taken care of, in essence, sort of indefinitely, or at least for a long enough time that it's not going to really influence your thinking or behavior, then you need to take care of that. Right? So it may or may not have to be for the rest of your life. It could be just for long enough that it's off your mind. And like, for example, you could take care of it, say you're set for the next few years, and you could let things reveal themselves at that point. And it might be that you can pretty easily make money with what you're already doing to finish things off for taking care of yourself more long term. So, and that's a very reasonable way to look at it. So for me, it was more like coming up with a number where instead of thinking in terms of a business making money long term, literally I could just have like my bank account or annuities or like interest or whatever, but that was reliable, being like my income, right, as opposed to even a business doing it. That was something that kind of worked for me psychologically and with other things I want to do with my life, and just kind of my own personal quirks and talents or lack thereof and so forth. For plenty of other people, plenty of you listening, it could be fine to just have a plan to be set for some amount of time into the future, and then let it reveal itself. Maybe you're going to have a pretty easy time continuing to make money in a way that is going to be quarantined in your life, where you're going to be okay doing it. And it's not going to totally take over your life and cause you to make a bunch of things priorities in your life, like regarding making money, that you otherwise would rather not really make priority, right? If making money is sort of taking over your life when you don't want it to, because it sort of has to, then that's what you want to get out of. And you can see that the opposite of that would not make sense. The opposite is where money issues sort of impose importance on you in a way that kind of takes over your life and makes your choices for you way too much. It's one thing if you have a business that you've established or even a job that, although it's kind of hard with a job in a lot of cases because jobs tend to really dictate to you. But if you have something going on where you're happy with that aspect of your life, it's a business that's under control, and that's accumulating money that's getting you ahead, where especially if you let that run for several years, that you might be able to kind of fully also be taken care of with your stable base with money that you put away from that business. Then that's great too. But not having that makes no sense, right? If the money situation is imposing itself on you, taking over, including your emotions, any kind of sense of panic or fear, if you're acting out of fear with money a lot, which is totally reasonable, like I'm not even criticizing it, we almost have to until we get some sense of stable base taken care of, right? And realistically, it's just going to happen. So if it's kind of influencing your decisions, messing with your sense of importance in a way that's unhelpful, then that's what you don't want to live that way, right? It's pretty clear. And that's not like a philosophy, really. That's just a reality, right? There isn't really a lot you can do with changing your psychology or anything, right? If you just have a real issue with stability with money. So as far as I can see, unless that's disproven for you in some way, then you can treat it as foundational, right? Unless I showed how the opposite is absurd. If you find a way that it's not absurd to have money be imposing priorities on you that you really don't want, or fears on you, or negative emotions on you that you don't want. Or we could say that clearly you want to find some way for that not to happen, whatever it might be. And generally, for those of you listening, that's going to involve some sort of monetization strategy. So you have that idea. And we see how that's important in life. So meta strategy sort of stacks. We sort of see if that's important, and then we figure out, well, now given that, we stipulate that, or we understand that we might say we don't even stipulate it because we've proven it by showing how the opposite is absurd. One way or the other, now we can build off of that and say, given that, and that gives us a sense, some starting point, some foothold for determining our kind of stacking our objectives or getting our objectives more immediate, more defined, like in terms of that we can take action on, right? But what I just described to you gives you a critical foothold. And of course, after you achieve that, then you can go and make money in a way where it's not being imposed on you if you want, and you can go and buy things or give money to help people and charity, whatever it might be, but now you're deciding and it's not being imposed on you, right? Because your stable base is taken care of, you're clear on that. So anyway, we have that. You have that objective first. If you've already achieved an objective like that, then there's an easy substitute that fully applies to the rest of what I'll talk about, which is what I just said regarding money and monetization, which is then you clearly know what you're trying to earn money for, like you want to buy a car, or you want to give a certain amount to charity, or you want to help your parents, or whatever it might be. You want to get your spouse out of work, whatever, and then that becomes your objective, right? But one way or the other, you have to get a foothold of some objective. And regarding the issue of money, then you want to declutter. Because if you have more than one goal, unless they're directly, logically kind of stacked on each other, then multiple goals that are active, can you see now how they're going to mess with your sense of importance? Because importance is where you're going to want to direct resources, right? And resources are basically either you're seeking to understand, you're trying to figure stuff out, and you're thinking about it, and you're learning, and you're trying stuff in order to understand, and or you're directing money, time to just doing stuff and so forth. So as soon as you have multiple non-aligned goals, you can't determine importance, and you need specifically one. If you have no idea of a goal or objective that's as like a foothold, then you can't start figuring out what's important, and so you can't think in terms of alternative use of resources, you see? So by realizing that strategy is about the alternative use of resources, these other things can fall into place logically. You realize you need exactly one objective, and that multiple ones will mess with you. And if you have multiple ones, you have a new objective, which is to declutter the existing ones. And in practice, the one that's going to constantly clutter you up is trying to prove something to yourself, uphold an image that you have privately and or publicly. A simple example of a public image is if you tell people, if you kind of let it be known that you're a successful lawyer or you're successfully married or whatever, now all of a sudden you need to uphold that. Or you make such and such amount of money. You make $10,000 a month or $100,000 a year or $1 million a year. As soon as that becomes a public image or a private image, now you basically have a new goal that gets there that's not helpful, which is just to upkeep that or uphold that image. And that's going to mess with whatever objectives that you would come up with more smartly. So you want to look out for that. And that is one big reason, I think, why our minds by default are so bad at figuring out importance, is because there's all these objectives that get triggered constantly, including if someone just walks in the room and starts talking to us or asking us about something. Now all of a sudden our objective to be a good family member or a good friend or just cultural ideas of how we're supposed to respond to people and so forth become a new objective that's active, and that's going to mess with our use of resources. I'm not saying that you always ignore people, of course, but then, but you need to decide which one goal you want active. You know, if you're going to be dealing just socially or dealing with your family or whatever, then you need to understand that that's separate and you're doing that, and that's now your full objective and you're dropping monetization for the moment. But one way or the other, because I want to move on here, but one way or the other, you want to realize that it all starts with you need to determine alternative use of resources, including like your focus, but like focus, money, time, that sort of thing. What problems are running through your mind? So if you need to determine alternative use of resources, then you need to figure out what's going to have the most impact. Where can you direct your resource to have the most impact? In other words, these are just synonyms. What's essentially in the way that I'm using it right now? What has the most importance and priority? And these things are relative to a goal, to an objective. We're not trying to figure out what's more important, like overall. I mean, you could, but not in some kind of vague way, right? Regarding strategy, if overall is the idea, if net good is the idea, then great. Figure that out first, and then build off of that. But one of the things for your net good is probably going to be something where it gets money from imposing itself on you, right? Because then you're decluttering, right? The whole stable base idea involves decluttering your life. So that's no longer messing with your sense of importance for other decisions that could involve your family, helping other people, could involve a business that makes money, but in the way that you want to determine is really important. If you're doing something like where money's no longer an issue, then it's just a whole different situation, right? And then you define why you're doing what you're doing, and as your main objective, and then you can go from there and figuring out sub-objectives that can have impact to hit the main objective. If someone's making money but they already have their stable base taken care of, or they could, that's where they're just doing it for their self-image. And they don't have clarity regarding money, and they think they're doing it for the money, but the money is just there to feed or uphold a self-image issue. And then if that's the case, at least you can just acknowledge it and say, look, I want to feel puffed up with importance, or I want to feel like I'm not a bad person, or I'm high enough status, or whatever, and say, for that reason, I need to make $100 million, $1 billion, whatever, and then decide how to best do that. And then at least you have one goal that you're going for, right? But you don't want to be conflicted, at least. Internal conflict is where you get a feeling of effort and takes you out of flow, and of course it totally messes with your decisions and sense of importance. So whatever it is you want, fine, narrow it down to one thing. That's all I wanted you to see. And you see how you cannot be a strategist unless you clearly identify an objective. And then you can narrow down the objective into sub-objectives based on the idea of like a semi-soft lock or an advantage or a building block or breaking a bottleneck, right? You can identify the next thing you want to go for that's going to help you. And then that can be fully the next objective, like the only objective on your mind is that sub-objective. And then you can determine importance in the near term based on that. But it has to be one, because you're not being a strategist unless you have one objective and it's clear. Right? Because unless you have that, you can't figure out importance. And if you can't figure out importance, then you can't figure out the alternative use of resources. Now, just because you know your objective, that's necessary but not sufficient. Once you know your objective, then the more understanding you build, including of details, and then you might, as you build understanding, you might come up with a smaller sub-objective, right? A sub-objective, and then go after that as on the way. But that's as you determine details and so forth. But the point is, you need to figure out some objective that's necessary, but not sufficient, and then you build your understanding. And then important, you'll automatically, as you build understanding of details and such, then you'll automatically judge importance and priority better and better, and your plan will reveal itself and so forth. And as I wrote here, a plan will reveal itself just fine as you figure out what is important. Once you know where and how to look, you gain understanding of details, and as you do that, a good plan will form. So great, I said that already, and then just on the slide, how to look. You of course are going to learn and figure out details by taking action to try stuff, by learning, watching videos, learning from a mentor, etc., books, whatever. But then, in addition to that, you need to, in order to let a plan reveal itself, you need to carry things out in your mind. And you want to use scenarios like, okay, if I did it, and you start with conditionals. If then, if this is the case, if I have this money and I have this product and I advertise in this way, and then you play things out and see, and then you say, well, how do I make this happen? And whatever. I'm mainly just pointing this out because I've talked about scenarios before. Or let's say you're writing a sales letter. Then you don't want to just think in terms of templates and associations. You want to think in terms of scenarios. What's the persona you're writing the sales letter for? A specific idea of a person, and then have an idea of their experience once they get inside of the product or once they use your service and so forth. But really, even without me expanding on this, just when I point out that the plan will reveal itself if you have a clear objective. And then you walk through the scenario of how you're going to make the next sub-objective, the rubber hit the road, so to speak. Then you kind of will figure out plans and what's important within the plan, the right tactics, by thinking in scenarios, rather than just like, if you don't on purpose think in scenarios, you're going to, without realizing it, you're going to be just thinking associatively, like with these kind of thought trains, and your mind's going to dart here and dart there, and you're going to think, oh yeah, and then there's this, and oh, but I have to do this, and I heard this somewhere, and just that sort of thing. So you need to purposely walk through things in time and so forth. But I don't want to get too involved in talking again about scenarios because I've done that before. And scenarios, you'll understand how to think in scenarios as you do it more and more. And a lot of you already have terrifically. Okay, let's go on to the next slide here. Now I'll get a bit more specific with business. I'm going to talk about semi-soft locks next in the next slide, but first I have just a few specifics that I want to additionally cover fairly quickly relating to both product and conversion. 1 second here, just want to turn something down. Okay. So, as you're doing your business planning, right, business as a whole involves traffic, product, and conversion. And the things I'm going to talk about here will sort of be built into your product, but they'll also are built there, as you'll see, to help when you're explaining your product or service. When I say product, that includes something that can be a service. But it'll help you convert as you build it into your product. And some of this may or may not be, may just be about products, some may be about conversion, but mostly it kind of is an overlap here, and these will help you with both. All right, these two things go together. Actually, I'm going to take out the space. Most or all of us might have heard of the USP, a unique selling proposition. I'm going to give my take on it, my angle on it. The idea of a unique selling proposition is that you'll be taught basically correctly, but I'll give a bit of an angle on explaining it more specifically. But that with your product or service, you want to have something kind of unique or that stands out. And let me clarify that for you, at least how I do it. One thing is you just need one. I've talked about this. I don't know if I've mentioned this in Alchemy or not. I've talked about it sometimes in some of my other videos. You don't need to have like a whole bunch of strengths necessarily. Suppose you have a digital marketing agency helping businesses get web traffic of some sort. Then what you want to present yourself as, or you need to fit sort of in a box that they already understand, right? And then you want to have like an extra nice thing in addition. But people need to fit you into their worldview to feel like they understand. Someone asked me a question by email about fitting, the difference between fitting and understanding, and I'll look to clarify that either in the probably in the last Alchemy webinar. The next two are going to be, I think I'm going to talk about goals in mind a final time on the 29th, and then on the 30th I'll talk about understanding and knowing what's true and that sort of thing. But anyway, your client is going to, or your potential client or potential customer of any sort, they need to sort of feel like they understand basically what you have to offer. And in most cases, that's going to involve something that they've heard of or they can already conceive. It's possible you can have a product or service that's outside of that, but in the case of a digital marketing agency, that's something people can conceive of. So you want to give off the sense that you're a competent version of that archetype, all right, like something that kind of already exists to some degree in their mind. But then you want to have like a one angle, and you don't have to be like unique in the world. You don't have to say I'm the best at the world and such, or I'm the only guy ever that has this angle. You don't really you don't really want to use things like best and comparatives, because it'll get the person that you're selling to, it actually implies they should compare you and think about you other people potentially, right? So instead, you want to give a sense of like one real strength that you might have. I don't know if I already had one in mind for a web traffic consultant. You could specialize in a particular thing. So you could be someone that, like an SEO consultant or a social media manager or a consultant or both of the above, as an archetype and come across as competent and such. And you could say, and what I'm particularly focused on or what I'm particularly good with is that whatever, you could be very reachable. That might not be a unique selling proposition you want to continue forever, but maybe you're reachable for the first couple of years, right, while you're getting rolling, and then later you've been around for a while and you've helped a lot of people, right, with and some of which you can mention as not referrals but references. Right? So your angle can change. That's the case like with OMG now. We're going into our 5th year, which is a lot for a business like ours, especially with the same, like pretty much the same product. There can be gurus that have had their name around for a while, but sticking with one program and of course with the amount of success that we've had, then now longevity and reliability and so forth is an angle that we have. And it has the advantage that anyone that isn't already equal to us can't really catch up, right? Because we'll always be 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 years ahead. So this can change over time. But you can think of something where you're the competent version, then you have, and you don't need to think of something. What I mean is you can also build, like you can think of something to build also. And another thing, remember, if you have a question, then that's as I'll get to, like your semi-soft lock in one sense. You're in great shape if you just ask the question. So if you just have the question, well, what extra angle can I have? And if you're wondering what type of angle would be relevant to a potential client, then use the mind reading that I talked about it, I think maybe in the 20th Alchemy, but they're all labeled with the topic. And really try to get in the head of potential clients and think what angle might really appeal to them, or think of a few and then build one. You don't need to have multiple ones. If you have more than one, it can actually confuse the prospect, and maybe feel like you don't take one thing particularly seriously. So really one is ideal, not 0 and not 2. So if you have that question, you'll be able to build to it, and if you aren't able to just figure it out by imagining being potential clients, or figure out maybe where to start poking around or where to start, then as you start talking to them, you'll now have that question and it'll help you. And you can think, what else could I have done, or what particular strength or way that I could have presented myself might have really made them feel like, oh wow. And the reason you want one is that people, remember I talk about you want to have a compelling vision and then a justification, and the fascinating thing about a justification is it doesn't have to be foundational. That's how people's minds are. You just need to kind of give people like a place they can feel like standing, but they're not going to look underneath it. As long as you have a good reason, it might be that if they really thought it through and talked to a bunch of other people at different angles, they might rather have some other angle. But they don't even think that way. You just if you give them a good vision, if they want to believe that they want to go with you because they want what you have to offer, they see the vision, and it's connected to something that moves them, right? That you've painted, then they just need a reason, and the reason could be pretty flimsy. Of course, I'm not suggesting that your reason is extra flimsy or whatever, but you also don't have to feel like it's the best reason ever or that you're better than everyone else. Is all I'm trying to help you with right now. It just has to be enough justification, And hey, I'm local right here, and I'm quite accessible, right? That sort of thing. And I'm not suggesting you use that one. I'm just giving you for instance. There can be other better angles, perhaps. But again, you don't really need to obsess. Oh, do I need a better angle? Come up with an angle, and then maybe if a better one reveals itself over time, great. But just like remember I talked about last time, where you can establish a sort of base camp, right? Where, like if you have a plot of land and some materials, you can build something there, and then you can use that as a staging area, and you can build something else. So come up with it with a decent angle, and then if you're worried it's not good enough, then just build a better one over time, or keep your eye out, and both keep your eye out product-wise, like for what you can build, and keep an eye out for what people might be looking for, or what you think might really convince them, or what really works for them when you kind of give them, poke around when you're talking to a potential client. Okay, great. So this will help you too. And what I try to do, I don't just try to come up with stuff that if you do it, it's helpful. I'm always thinking myself in terms of alternative use of your resources. And so when I give you these things to take into account, the point here is that I'm telling you that they'll have impact, and that I'm not giving you like perfect priorities here, like this is the most important thing, this is the second most important thing, anything like that. But anything I'm covering here, it's going to be worth getting right. It's going to be worth putting some resource into getting right, and I've already screened for that for you, where I'm not just trying to come up with a whole bunch of things. I like to have fewer things for you, but that are important. So I'm not just telling you that this is neat, but I'm telling you it's important, and you should do it. There's pretty much no situation where you don't want this. I mean, where you don't want that one kind of strength, that one clear angle, that one justification, that'll go with the vision that you're painting of the benefit for that, right? So that you can, if they imagine getting extra people calling them and their business is building, they can expand, and great. And then you say, and here's something that you get when you go with me. Here's the thing, right? That you're not normally going to see, and it's this. You give them that, and they're like, awesome, and then you're good. Doesn't mean you'll make 100% of sales, whatever, but it's definitely the way to go. But then if you were to keep going and say, and plus you get such and such, and plus you get such and such, then it just starts to confuse them, right? And so it's more effort for you, and you pretty much will often take yourself backwards. Then they start wondering if they're paying extra, you see, because you're so amazing, right? And so on and so forth. And also, they might start disbelieving you and so forth. So I want you to see how you really too can be counterproductive, and specifically one is the sweet spot. But if you don't give any, right, then you can give them a vision, but then they feel like something's missing, like they want that justification. So you make sure to give it to them. It's possible that in addition to this, you'll want a justification for why they go now, they jump now with you and don't wait. So you can separately think of that. That's a separate justification. So that you can have one strength or angle or unique, relatively unique. Doesn't that, again, unique is misleading. That's why I wanted to explain this to you. But a good justification angle. Like again, here's where you get with me specifically is this strength also. But then on top of that, a reason why they should go now rather than later is smart. Okay, I'm going to move on now to this next thing I wrote here on the slide. You need both of the following. Now, I've talked about this at length in my information course that I made last year, and I might have talked about it here and there. Perhaps I'm actually not quite sure if I've talked about it in conversion videos that I've done or the client getting, but I want to make sure, I want to stress it here because it matters tremendously. This is a big thing that I've done that's contributed to my success for sure, and that's both in helping to design a product and conversion to go along with it. Because again, I take everything into account, the traffic, where they're coming from and what they're looking for, but then I'm building a product with conversion in mind, and I'm building conversion with success of the product in mind. So you want to pay attention to perceived and actual value, distinguish from each other, and have both. And that's instead of, normally people don't really think too much about this, and then on top of that, when they do, they think in terms of value, like you've got to provide value. Okay, I want to provide value. Well, as soon as you start talking about providing value in a way that blurs together perceived and actual value, then you've made a big mistake, and you have really trapped yourself, and it could be a nearly or fully lethal trap. This is actually particularly important, and again, particularly a trap that people can fall into. It's really important not to just think of value as one thing. It is two very different things, and they both matter tremendously. If anything, perceived value matters more, but the actual value is going to let you snowball and so forth, as I have 2 slides from now. It can also keep you from getting sued and so forth. But anyhow, I'm mostly kidding there. All right, you want to embrace the idea of perceived value. Without perceived value, nothing gets rolling. You don't get started. If you don't get started, you can't make money, you can't help anybody. And not only do you not get started, but you also, in one sense, can't keep going. To keep going, actual value helps keep a customer and keep you going in one sense. But perceived value, if it doesn't keep up, people will very often stop consuming. Now, at some point, the actual value can, like, if someone's using your product, maybe with Alchemy, for example, basically, here we can look at it this way. Perceived value is significantly probably more important up front than actual value. As time goes on, actual value the pendulum can swing towards actual value, like as you continue with a particular customer. So in Alchemy, I had to pay particular importance to being interesting, compelling, seeming like it was useful and important early on. There's only so far I can go with that, given the subject matter. So, but at least I was very aware of it, and not just aware of it when I was talking and when I was preparing, but aware of it for years before that, and always working on it and trying to build it and try to understand it better. Perceived value is relative to the mind of the consumer, period. It has nothing to do with what you're thinking, except to the extent that what you're thinking matches the consumer, or the potential consumer and the actual consumer. Whatever they perceive is important, or sort of valuable, is perceived value, and it's absolutely necessary. If you build it, they will come is just not really true, right? Because if someone doesn't consume something, and really if they don't consume it several times, in most cases, they're not going to experience the actual value, right? If you have skin cream, even if it's super duper, if they only use it for a week, they might not see the value. So you need enough perceived value that they use it for a month or two, right? Until the actual value catches up with you. Same thing with Alchemy itself, right? It seems like there was a time for plenty of you where the actual value caught up with things where I could relax a bit more about being too worried about the perceived value. Although I still keep it up. I still think about it. But I just, it can focus more and more on actual value in a sense. Ironically, the perceived value goes up anyway. Well, let me just think about this here. Yeah, another way these are both valid ways to look at it. I'm going to give you another angle. It might seem a little bit contradictory, but it's just a paradox is not an actual contradiction. It's more of a seeming one, but it's not. Anyhow, as someone experiences the actual value, then that is an example of perceived value. Does that make sense? So, right, so they get the skin cream. They're not going to use it and keep, let's say they need to use it for a month to experience actual value. Then you need to have the appearance of value in various different ways. I'll give some hints on what I mean, or examples at least in that example, for them to keep consuming it long enough. At some point, they'll just observe it actually helping them, in which case that's perceived value also. So that's a good way to look at it. As the actual value spits out or outputs perceived value, then you have perceived value, and you're okay. So you don't need to add it additionally as much, just by logic, right? You might not need to add it at all if it's spitting out enough perceived value to get you over the edge where they keep using it, or maybe it's spitting out enough, but you still want to keep up a decent amount of perceived value additionally. But you're being helped along a lot by by what the actual value is revealing to them. Remember, there can be actual value that they're not perceiving. Keep that in mind, right? A product can be helping them and they might not see it, or they might not see it yet. Maybe it's helping them and they'll see it in 3 months. That doesn't help yet, right? So maybe it's helping them and they're seeing half of how much it's helping them. So they're getting that much perceived value. There's still value they're not seeing, so that in that sense there's not perceived value regarding the value they're not seeing yet. So hopefully that was clear. I'll go over it one more time, but I actually think it might have made good sense. You need to consistently have perceived value, which exists only in the mind of the user, the consumer, your customer, or client. You need to keep that up forever, over the threshold in which they'll stick with you, or else they won't stick with you, right? At some point, relative to the product, relative to the user, and so forth, the actual value will spit out perceived value. They will see value for themselves just from the product actually or service actually working. That may or may not be enough perceived value to fully get you over the threshold where they stick with you. But you need to always pay attention to that. And one way or the other, there always has to be enough perceived value that they continue with you, or of course, by logic, they won't continue with you. And you have to find a new customer, right? In the beginning, the actual value isn't shooting off really any perceived value, except to the extent that you have believable testimonials, right, or reports. Those get more believable the more, with various ingredients, like the more step-by-step progressional they are. Here's where I was when I started. The more the prospect identifies, feels like the other person's an us. They might not even believe it's a real person, then of course it's a them. But one way or the other, you have to always have enough perceived value which only exists relative to the client or customer, or you lose the person. And actual value is only spitting out perceived value, if it does, in the mind of the user. And you can build things so you'll have that. Of course, that's efficient, And at some point, the other thing the value can do, the actual value or lack thereof can do, is spit out negatives, or even if it's neutral and like not help, even it might not be hurting the customer, but if it's not helping them, and plus of course they're paying for it and they're using it, then if it's not spitting out something that they perceive, that they're not seeing it work one way or the other, then you're going to need to put even more. And if there's like a negative drag from that at some point, you won't get that typically on day one, right? But at some point, people expect to see the value working or whatever. Then if that goes negative, then you need to pour even more perceived value into things in order to keep people. Or you keep losing people out the other end and you have to keep getting new people in. And obviously if you're below a certain legal threshold, then you have issues that way. Or even to review threshold, right, if you're getting bad reviews and that sort of thing. But now let's again look and see how, until I explained this, it's very possible that you blurred these two together if you hadn't heard me talk about this before, and you just thought in terms of value. I need to provide value. Once you distinguish these two things, you can think much more clearly, and your strategy, you can allocate resources more properly and so forth. And you stop rebelling against this. This is reality. It's neither bad nor good. It's just the way things kind of have to work, right? It's the same way you're going to act when you're a consumer, right, of a product or service. You have to have enough perceived value to buy it in the first place and then to keep using it. It's the only thing you can do, right? We're not omniscient. We're not all-knowing. So we can only go by our perception, right? And so you're actually, assuming that there is actual value to your product, then you're doing an important service. Part of what you have to do is provide that perceived value, or else people can't benefit from the actual value. Of course, then you want the actual value too, but realizing that those are kind of two separate things you have to build, it keeps you from, once again, having two objectives at the same time. See, if you blur value together into one thing when it's actually two different things, then there's actually two objectives you're blurring together, and you can't figure out importance properly. If you distinguish them, then you properly you hit each objective separately, which hitting different objectives means just different plans, right? Different resources are channeled into one thing properly and channeled into the other properly and separately. So you need to fully do both. And you don't want to just be upset at the world or feel like something's wrong. Well, there is something wrong, but you'll know what's wrong if you make something with a lot of actual value, but you're not getting very far with getting people to buy or even to stick with you. Once you understand and embrace the idea of perceived value separately, then you know what's going wrong, and you can do both. And with actual value, you want to stop fooling yourself, right? And people want to think they're already smart. There's some cost, like I talked about before, and so forth. You want to keep working on the actual value too, because that's going to spit out perceived value or go negative on you at one point. And plus, it's more fulfilling for you in reality. You're going to want to be helping people with your product to some degree, right? You're just not going to really feel very good as a person otherwise, realistically. Tim Schmidt is an OMGer, and he's terrific, very successful. And he had, I think it was called Elite Serum, but a skincare, and he talked to a skincare product, and he talked at OMG Live, and he explained how at first he got his website working well with a partner, and was getting people were buying, but they weren't retaining that well because they're manufacturing the product somewhere else in a different country, and then he got it manufactured locally here where you could see the lab and where they were dedicated to quality, and he got way better retention just from the actual value of it. Because he did some research, got the right stuff, and it really was more valuable. It never was a scam. It was always a decent product, but it got way better realistically. And that's an example of actual value mattering. And then perceived value is kind of obvious. And you can, once you get started, you can build your actual value. You don't have to be the best ever, right, or be super confident starting out, but you'll build your actual value too, and you'll build more of an idea of what perceived value is in the mind of your prospects and customers. And knowing to look for both of these things separately has helped me tremendously. Because again, there's two totally separate things. When they're blurred together, you just can't see them properly. So I'm always a detective for what is perceived as valuable regarding the type of thing I do. And then separately, I'm a detective for what's actually valuable. And again, I mentioned this, but just to stress, it's a real trap to rebel against perceived value. You have to embrace the importance of this and not feel like it's unfair, or people are bad, or the world shouldn't be that way. That's like saying people should be omniscient. They just aren't. And so we have limited knowledge, right? And we have to make the best decisions we can on that limited knowledge. Sometimes we can know things clearly for certain, but whether they should consume or buy or consume your product is not going to be one of those typically, right? Especially not for a while, not up front. Okay, great. So that's critically important for you to have. And then I'm going to go to the last thing on this slide here regarding product conversion. This is maybe a little bit more towards conversion, but it's still something you kind of you can build into your product in a sense a little bit. The product itself can be a little bit different based on this. I think it's easy, especially with something like being a digital marketing person, SEO consultant, or anything like that. I think it's easy to think of yourself as like a person or as like an agency. And I think that if you frame things in your, remember, you're providing a compelling vision and then justifying it, right, as one way of looking at sales. Part of a compelling vision is presenting your product or service partly as a place. And you might say, well, what if it's like an e-commerce product? Well, for sure, if there's a place, a big example, or like kind of a somewhat extreme example, would like Thomas the Train, right? If you have a small child, you know Thomas the Train, and there's cartoons with it, and even you can buy like a railway set, and there's like all kinds of add-ons for it, and different specific trains that all have names, or like they're like people, right? And they're all friends of Thomas, the main guy, and so forth. So they make it, and there's an actual place, forgetting the name of it, but where they live and so forth. So by making that into a place, do you think they sell more trains and it's all more compelling? And the children actually enjoy, if you give a child a non-Thomas the Train train, he actually very well might not enjoy it as much because Thomas has videos and storybooks that they can read, and it feels more real and it's more contextualized, right? So a place, I've talked about contextualizing in many different ways throughout Alchemy. A place will create a further powerful context around your product that will generally only add to what you're doing, right? So if one person's selling a train, the other person's selling Thomas the Train, that's really connected to a place and a personality. It's very important to have a personality too. And of course, we practice what we preach at OMG, right? Clearly, OMG is presented as a place, and then there's often specific people associated with it, right? Cotton, myself, Greg, Mike, and I can list everybody, right? Liz, Fletch, Joe, Stephen. You can have both. You can have one person, you can have multiple persons, and a place. Now let me expand on a place. So how about a digital marketing agency? Well, you could say, like, even your computer can be thought of as like a place. You could say it's like you can create a vision for someone that signs on with you as a client, where like when you get me, when you're working with me, you get my whole factory. I think of my workplace and my computers that I use as like a factory, and there's all these different machines and individual plants in the factory. You wouldn't believe the resources that one builds up as a digital marketing consultant over the years. I have a factory for a number of programs and resources and methods where to get Facebook likes, and then I have another factory that integrates with the Facebook factory for YouTube videos, that creates them. It helps to get visitors to them. And then I have a separate factory in this place that I call the whole thing a factory, but I have a separate, you could say, like, set of machines in my factory that all are pumping out power to rank you on Google, right? And then these machines also integrate, and it's like this this incredibly powerful, this great place that you're plugging into. You're plugging your business into this place, this factory with all these machines that work together. And then me, of course, I'm like the orchestrator, you know, and the director, and I get in there, and I'm also the, you know, one of the workers, but I also I'm like the manager, and or the conductor of a symphony, if you want to mix metaphors. But again, they're plugging themselves into this place, and you describe the place. And as you're doing that, you're describing a process for what happens at the place. So now you have 3 Ps, we could say: a place, person, personas, and a process. Right? What goes on in the place. And that is probably an aha moment for a lot of you, and you can see now how to create a more compelling vision for your products and services, whether it's e-commerce. Of course, you can make an individual bundled Amazon listing without necessarily doing all this, but think about white labeling or branding yourself. Even with white labeling means you take a product that exists and you buy the rights to label it yourself in your own brand. But even in the absence of that, just your Amazon account, you can, I actually don't do Amazon, but presumably you can call yourself something. And even if you sell toothbrushes, you can call yourself like the Hygiene Factory, and you can give a little description about that kind of makes it into a bit of a place, you know, where we're always looking for things that make hygiene easier and more effective and quicker and more comfortable, you know, or whatever, or more fun, you know, if you have some fun toothbrushes. You see, so even with your brand name and a bit of a description, you can describe yourself as a place. And I just even had a process in there, didn't I? Because once you have a place, it naturally opens up a space to explain the process of what defines the place and what goes on in the place. And then you can explain the people in the place, right? And a place is a placeholder for the process and the people. And then what does that do? It makes a scenario much more naturally, right? If it's just you as a person, as an SEO consultant, where's the scenario? You can try to give a bit of it. And you can make a place like Houghton does with a Dropbox environment where they go into as well, like a place where they're going to go, like a membership discovery area or whatever it might be, where they interact with as your client. So you can, that can be part of your place. You can be, I'm a factory, and I'm also like an academy, right, or even a theater, right? When you plug in with me, you get my factory working for you. And then you get to, it's like my, our what is it called? Like a room where you do meetings, like our meeting room, our consultation room, right? Our consultation area or our discovery area, where they're in there and they get in there. You say I'll email you updates, but you can also access your updates in there of your rankings. Plus, there's videos explaining to you what's going on. You can message me from in there. Right? So you get the factory and you get the discovery area when you plug into my place, you know, this place. And you see that naturally builds a scenario for somebody. If you're just like, yeah, I'm a person, I'm going to rank you, I'm going to do this, the phone's going to ring and so forth. There's a bit of a scenario there, but it's not as much perhaps as it can get much more compelling as you turn it into a place. And of course you take your place and the scenario bridges to the benefit for them, right? Obviously, where their phone's ringing, they're making more money, whatever juices them. But it all happens easier and in a more vivid and compelling and complete way. Scenarios, it's not so much about seeing things in Technicolor, either in your own head or when you're talking to somebody. But the more angles you have, the more real the scenario gets, right? So if it's just you as a person, it's not as real as the place and the process and the person. That's more of a scenario that in the way that a scenario really is, it's more vivid. So again, vivid doesn't mean you see the vision as if you're half asleep and you're like seeing something, where it's extremely visual, right? But you describe a place and it's much more vivid in that way, just like when I described it to you just now. And you can look at how we do this with OMG, and you can apply this to pretty much anything. And again, it feels more real to people. It's not really, with scenarios, it's not so much about vividness as reality. especially, and when I say real, these angles, it feels like you can stand on it. It feels like it's more there, right? You don't have to you don't have to overthink that. But we're talking about conversion here, and this is obviously effective. Okay, excellent. We're flying through here. Let's talk about semi-soft locks. I know I'm jumping a bit. It'll ideal for memory would be to talk about each of these on a separate webinar and be done. But and ideal for you, if I did that, then we'd only get to 1/4 of the information by the time we finished. So this way you have it, and then you can go back over it. All right. I realized as I was talking to my wife a couple of weeks ago, it was very helpful to talk about the idea of semi-soft locks, and I described them to you before in terms of a game, and the games are pretty defined. And she was trying to understand it in terms of relationships, what would be like a hard lock or a soft lock. What I want to do is talk more without really comparing it so much to what exactly does a hard lock mean or a soft lock. What you want to do with strategy, you have your objective, whatever it might be. Even if the objective, and an objective can be a sub-objective, it can be a more overall objective, and you're trying to figure out the sub-objective. What you're trying to boil things down to is an objective where you will pretty much just about almost certainly or fully certainly over time hit the target if you focus on it. All right? Like within the resources that you can realistically channel into hitting that target, you can hit it. You're looking for a sub-objective of that nature, and then you don't need to break it down further at that point. What people will do is if you find yourself hoping that you're going to hit a target, such as you hope that this particular client will say yes or that some client will say yes, whenever you're kind of hoping but you don't feel certain that you're going to hit an objective, then that's where you're going for what we might call a soft lock or even a hard lock. But you're trying to bite off a big chunk because you feel like if you can achieve that, then you're going to be successful. But the problem is, sure, but it's too hard to reach. And so that's not good strategy. Part of good strategy is you want to allocate think of that, you're allocating resources. Do you want to allocate your resource into something that you have a 20% chance of hitting, but if you hit it, you definitely win? Or do you want to allocate your resource into something that you have a 100% chance of hitting or a 99% chance of hitting, where as long as you're competent at that point, you'll win? Well, the answer is obvious the way I phrased it, right? But what people will do, if you ever found yourself hoping to hit a target regarding anything, but including money, when I say hoping, I mean like you want to achieve an objective, like making money or something with romance or whatever it might be. You want it, and then you feel like, oh, if I can just make this thing happen, but you just feel like you're not sure if you can make it happen, and you're scared you might fail in hitting it. If you've ever done that, you've done the opposite of what you've done, the silly choice of what I'm talking about, where you're channeling your resources into something where you have, by your own estimation, you have 50-50 or like some chance of hitting it, only a 20% chance, 50% chance, even if you have an 80% chance, but you could have had a 99 or 100% chance if you figured it out more properly what to go for, then that doesn't make sense. Just because you might have a bigger advantage if you hit the harder target doesn't matter. You want to find a target you can definitely hit because you can go for that harder target anyway next, right? Think about it. Or you can go for something that now reveals itself to be a bigger, like a even more advantageous target once you hit the first semi-soft lock. But really it's going to be inevitable from there, right? Because from there, once you realize this strategy, it's actually always inevitable. Because you might say, wait a second, David, I've already won. If I have a 100% chance of hitting the semi-soft lock, and at that point I can find another objective that I have a 100% chance of hitting that it gives me a further advantage, and that's going to build until I win, like I get my final objective, then what you're saying is I always win. Well, yeah, that really is how life is, actually. You just have to get this. This is just a restatement of my other deep stuff I've been telling you, and that's why seeking understanding is great, because it's constantly a semi-soft lock. Now, at some point after you seek understanding and you get some understanding regarding your objective, you're going to identify something in addition to just understanding, right? Like ranking a website or a YouTube video with Joe's new amazing cloud rank software. That is an actual task that you'll do that's going to do something like in reality, right, in the physical world, right? But you'll gain understanding, and then something like that will reveal itself, and then that's your new semi-soft lock. You go after it, right? But the whole way, it's inevitable, right? Once you realize you can start with understanding, and you're always going to get some of that, and when you're even in understanding, you can break that down, and you poke around for a foothold, until and then once you have a foothold, then you start to build out from there on things that you know, and then more will reveal itself. More you'll narrow where you're poking around until you know just where to look to get the right understanding that you need. Or you'll just stumble on it and you'll have it, and then you'll figure out something to do like in reality, and then that'll kick back extra understanding while you're doing it, plus you'll be accomplishing and building a resource that's going to help you, like ranking a YouTube video or whatever. Or at some point it'll become obvious how to get a client, either because you'll just get one by just naturally, or you'll realize, oh, okay, I have enough resources and I realize how to go about just building that way to people until I get somebody. Same thing with a romantic relationship. At some point you'll realize, maybe from me saying it now, maybe from working on it yourself, that what you need what's the semi-soft lock with a romantic partner is not, what people do is try to get married, or try to get the person to sleep with them, or try to get the person to go on a date with them, or whatever. What you are going for, and now this is an objective, and again, if you identify an objective, either it's a semi-soft lock, or you just realize the objective, and then you look for something that's going to make it inevitable that you'll be able, if you're competent from there, you'll be able to hit that objective. But just to give you an objective that'll be helpful if you don't already know it, and I had to figure it out from scratch, and I haven't heard it put just this way. It might be somewhere for sure, but I haven't come across it. But there's lots of relationship books. There's a zillion of them. I haven't read them all. But specifically what you want is someone that you have great chemistry with. That doesn't mean stuff in common at all. That's kind of irrelevant. That can change over the years. What it is where you have an easy time wanting the other person as a romantic partner. The person probably literally won't smell to you, like almost ever. The exact same person. I've come across people that I shower every day and so forth, but they don't. It doesn't happen very much. But they think that I smell bad, and then most other people, it seems, don't think I smell bad, or I look to do something about it. And I don't mean like so much in normal life, but if I run, or if I'm sweating or something like that. But it just as an illustration, you might have had the same thing at some point happen to you, but then with a romantic partner, almost certainly, just in terms of actual chemistry, they won't be thinking that. If they do, there's almost no way that you have chemistry with someone that thinks that you smell bad. Anyhow, so chemistry is where you have an easy time being attracted to that person, and virtually always. And you could say, well, what if people change? I don't know what, they gain a bunch of weight if that's not up someone's alley or something like that. Well, with the right chemistry, you can work stuff like that out one way or the other. And the person will be motivated enough by being attracted to you that if that's important to you, they can keep a lid on things, right? I gained some weight when I got married, but then I kept a lid on it and stopped that for many, many years. I haven't gained weight after that. Anyhow, you don't have to overcomplicate it. What you don't want is somebody where they maybe might like you if you win them over, and you have to put a lot of effort into it, because then you'll have to keep doing that. It's going to fade after you. So instead you find someone that naturally is very attracted to you, and it's nothing to do with having stuff in common. That can obscure stuff. And so forth. But you have to figure out someone where both of you have an easy time being attracted to the other person romantically. And then, and that just has to be over a threshold. You don't have to find the person that you have the most of that of in the world or something like that. And we can prove that by the opposite. Another example of law of non-contradiction. if our strategy was we were always looking to upgrade when it came to relationships, always like trying to find the person who matched us just the most perfectly, or that we were most attracted to, or something like that, then how would that work? Like, you would never ever be committed to anyone in a relationship, right? You literally can't, or be extremely unrealistic too, and that doesn't make sense, right? So clearly, it's a thresholdish thing, and clearly, people can be very, very happy with someone they're with, without knowing that that person is the most possible person where they have the most mutual attraction between them and the other person. At some point, you commit and you just grow together as well, and so it becomes that way anyway, essentially. And then the other main thing, but this is critically important, is that you need to be able to reach them to, and this will have a parallel in business, because this pattern logically repeats pretty much anywhere. Even in making a sale, the same type. I'll show you how the same pattern will repeat. So you need the chemistry, and then you need a way to deal with issues where you can realistically work through them. And you can't know that. You can use the momentum of the euphoria of meeting with someone in order to help reinforce that and have a plan in place if things go wrong. But really, you'll also like have that reveal itself in various ways. But there's ways you can tell even early on. If you are talking to someone and there's topics that are just off limits to them, and they just kind of get angry instead of seeking understanding about things, they don't necessarily have to understand like the deepest alchemy thoughts or anything like that. They don't have to even be that interested in alchemy. Ideally, they would be. But you need to be able to reach them about important things, and not have them be somebody that just shuts the door on you, or they're like a wall in some way that matters. And if they're in a wall in places that don't matter too much, then they're probably going to be a wall, right? Like they're going to shut you out in places when it does matter. So just because you guys are wild about each other and the sex is great and you're having sex 20 times a day or whatever, then that isn't like if you have sex twice a day, that's not twice as much evidence that you guys are in great shape versus if you have sex once a day. Instead, if you're having good chemistry, regardless of how much sex that means, then as long as you're reasonably happy with the amount, right? If you're not, then that's a good indication of not good chemistry about important things. But then it's critically important that you be able to, you have someone that you can reach. Part of it then might be being motivated about you. Part is maybe building some respect with them and so forth. And you can't always judge that immediately, but you can get some indications. But you can also look to build trust with a person, and at least ask the question of how to build that and maintain it. And judging the other person ever at all, trying to get justice on them, like get them back for stuff so they understand how you feel by hurting them back. All that's going to detract from it. So you want to understand what builds and maintains that ability to reach somebody and learn to operate that way. And you need, when you understand the chemistry thing, you also build and maintain that both for yourself and for them. You kind of get a good sense of what matters to them in terms of maintaining chemistry. Make sure it's something that you can maintain reasonably. And do it. But if it's not something you can maintain, then that's not the person for you, right? It should be chemistry that you can maintain easily. And also someone that you can reach as long as you behave in a way that reinforces that, not judging them, not causing them to wall themselves off from you, and being a person that can be reached yourself, right? Being reached means that if someone wants to communicate something or needs to discuss something or work through a problem, that you guys can do that together. There might be some tears, there might be some difficult conversations doing it, but if you can do it without like the tears being too crazy or overly getting in the way or them resenting you or whatever for long term, then that's good. If you get through to them after sometimes maybe some difficult conversation for a little while or something like that, that's okay. How does that relate to like making a sale or doing business? Well, the chemistry is the vision, right? And the rest of the sale is then not having blocks, right? Or the justification, right? So you need to have the motivation, and it's the same thing with you accomplishing something. You need to have the motivation. You need to have a plan for getting through blocks. Same thing with your business plan. All right, with your business plan, there needs to be an impetus. Like it needs to be plugged into something in a way that powers it forward. And actually, let me go to the next slide in a moment here, which I'll have more on that. And but then you also need to be able to get through obstacles, get rid of problems, break bottlenecks, look for places where everything's going smoothly, but if one thing breaks down, then you're screwed, and you have a backup. Make sure you have a backup plan for those in place over time. You can't start with everything in place and a backup plan for everything when you first start, but that's the next thing to get in. Not just to build and go bigger and bigger. You move forward, but then you consolidate, right? And so first and foremost, you need the forward motion, right? You can't just be nowhere and be building a backup plan for your backup plans and be ready for any obstacle that comes up while you're not moving. But then you need to think in terms of what you're going to do when issues come up and bottlenecks come up and obstacles, or if something breaks that everything depends on. A particular person that might, if something happened to them, or even temporarily, that you have a huge problem, you need to eventually have backup. Or it could be merchant processing where you're able to accept credit cards. You might want backup, or any number of things. A traffic source, if you're getting leads through Google, or you're paying for ads, and either something goes wrong with your account. AdWords is notorious for getting shut down with Google, or if they're no longer converting because the environment changes. Things like that. So that same pattern where you need an energy source, and then you need to make sure that you're not going to get taken out with pitfalls or get overly constrained with bottlenecks or an obstacle. So that's the same thing with a relationship. And as obvious as that sounds, look around or think back, and people will report regarding business and relationships. Oh, it's going great. We made this much last year or last month, and now we're making this much. And we just keep growing. It's great. We're doing better and better. Well, that's only half the picture. That matters. If someone was making 0 last month, 0 this month, and 0 next month, that wouldn't be helpful. But if someone is only talking that way, just like with a relationship, oh, it's so great, we have this in common, we're doing this, we're so into each other, we do this, and then we're doing that, and we're going on this vacation, and it's so exciting. Well, someone if that's the only thing they're reporting, is completely missing strategy. And it's terrible thinking to only think about half. You're basically almost guaranteed to fail if you get just the one half right and not the other. And so you need to be thinking about what if and the problems that can occur and have a plan for that. Of course, people that are paralyzed by inaction, obviously you need forward motion as well. And you can't just be thinking what if, and not get started. Right, so either half will totally combust you in almost every case. Either you'll be frozen or you'll blow up and implode or explode or something like that. You must have both. And that's the case. And I just skipped a slide here. But I just wanted to point out this thing here. And this is my final slide. I'll make sure I covered semi-soft locks, but I think I pretty much did. I'll go back to it for a moment. But I'll give you a couple of angles. Remember, fundamentally with strategy, we're trying to figure out what's important so we can direct our resources, including starting with our understanding about what details and what sub-objectives, and then that'll define what we want to understand and get details and direct resources. So we need a way to figure out what's important. I'm giving you a couple of schemes, a couple of things on this page. This will help you figure out what's important, especially these top two things here is kind of all you need. And then I'm reminding you to align vectors decently, but I already pointed that out. If you have a vector, means like a force in a particular direction. If you have multiple goals, multiple objectives that are conflicting with each other, then quarantine them separately, do them both in a separate space, or declutter, drop one totally until you either permanently, if it's unnecessary, like the self-image thing, or just separate them in time and space if you need to accomplish both things. But if they, for example, selling a product, you need to be thinking about what's awesome about your product. Working on building your product, you need to be questioning the box that it's in, right, conceptually. You need to be thinking about what might be wrong or what could be improved on it. So developing a product, and even if you're teaching for some reason or conveying, then you, or even if you're performing a service, you need to come across like you're sure and you're confident, right? But when you're developing and working on the product, you don't want to just be trying to add stuff to it. You need to be looking at your foundation and making sure that's even better, or the box that you're in and questioning it. Those are two separate vectors, though, right? Questioning your product, then they're both legitimate. Questioning the very context, the box, so to speak, that your product is in, the assumptions that are involved in it, is different than the mindset you need in order to sell your product or when you're interacting publicly about your product. Even when you're fulfilling it, you're still kind of selling it, right? Because that perceived value has to be there, or else they're going to get, wonder about you. So those are two different things, but you have to quarantine them out. You have to do them at two different times, right? And sometimes you'll work with partners. I've managed to do that a lot. I'll kind of be involved with both, but also by having multiple people involved in a joint venture, you can have one person more focused on selling and one person more focused on getting the product right, including questioning about the product and so forth. Just depending, one way or the other. And that can switch. There could be times for both, or there could be one person mostly selling, and there can be one person working with the other person selling sometimes, other times working with a product. There could be a third person. Use your common sense and thinking clearly. But the whole point is that you can have those goals active, or those objectives active at different times and places. Even within yourself, if you're just one person, you just have time apportioned, or a situation where it's defined such that you are in sales mode, in a different situation where you're in questioning the product mode to improve it fundamentally, and just separate them out. All right, that's that. But up here I gave you two schemes that can help overall give you a sense of what you're trying to do with your business venture, your monetization situation, whatever, but any particular thing where you're doing a product or service to make money. The obvious one I've talked about a zillion times, but I did come up with this scheme if you've heard a lot. I work with it with Mike and presenting it, and he's great at explaining it too. But notice that there's nowhere else to look: product, traffic, conversion. In any order, each one, as you bolster it, will give an advantage to the others, and it'll give an advantage in that you don't need to carry the better you do with conversion and traffic, the less the product all by itself will have to carry the weight of the business. So you don't have to crush it totally with traffic or conversion or product. As you start to be pretty good with one, it'll make the others easier. Right? Obviously, having a better product will help you with conversion, not just because, in a zillion ways, right? You'll have something better to describe in the first place, right, when you're describing it, and then you can get referrals and testimonials, and it'll increase your confidence, et cetera, et cetera. If you have more people looking at you, then looking at your product, like more prospects, then a couple of good things happen. One is you can make your offer more clear. You're going to be scared if you only have a few prospective customers. You're going to start twisting yourself in knots realistically with saying your product is going to do this and that and the other thing and so forth. And that can mess with expectations, but you're kind of desperate to make the sale. As you have more traffic and people it's better traffic relative to you and your offer, then you can be more clear. Like Cotton on his website will say, here's who I don't work with. I don't work with startups. I don't work with these certain types of product types. And then there's something else, right? And you could say, look, this is what I do, this is what I don't do. Better. If you have better traffic, it'll make your conversion, of course, easier if you're talking to someone that's more interested in what you have to say, or that contextually feels like they came to you rather than you came to them cold, right? So as you improve on any of these, then the others have to carry less burden. And so you can look for what's the next one. As you're looking for your semi-soft locks, right, your next sub-objectives that you can certainly hit if you focus in on them, that after you hit them, that all you have to do is be confident after that, and you'll continue to inevitably succeed. What I do in practice, and this is great for me, it helps me to focus or plan my thinking constantly, is and develop, which means direct resources properly, is I think where's the place that's most clearly going to be able to bolster next, right? Either it's a bottleneck or it's the thing that realistically I can build next that's going to give me an advantage with the others. So I'm looking, where's the most opportunity? Where's the biggest bottleneck right now? Where's the potential problem where everything's kind of on one pillar or depending on one person, and if that breaks or the person has an issue even temporarily, that there's a problem and have a plan B for that, etc. So I'm looking here, and seeing what to build. If you're just starting out, then you figure out which one to build first based on your situation. And once you look at it that way, it might be pretty clear. Often that's product, but it could be traffic, could be ranking of something on Google, depending on the product, if it's a good thing for Google ranking or something like that. Or there could be people in your neighborhood that are local, that you have ins with, right? And you can tailor your product toward that, or you can tailor the niche of your product, the specialization of your product toward that. Maybe you have an, like Fletch, he was in like home improvement, right? Like I think like in, helping with environmentally friendly upgrades to like air conditioners and houses and such. So he knew that. So that was his traffic that he could get. And he based his kind of specialized, like he joined OMG, so that helped him with his product in the first place. That gave him an overall sense of a product regarding Google SEO. And then, but then he niched it out based on the traffic that he was most close to, and that he knew better to convert, right? He knew how to talk to those people better. So you see how it all fits together and gives an advantage to the others, and you can use it to help it plan these three things. Another separate way to look at things that can also help you is, I talked about this, right, when I talked about your offer, and Megan said how it really helped her to properly value getting started. You need to get started first. Then you create snowball conditions. That means where you can get referrals, or your product is so good, you know, that people start seeing results. Sometimes there's multiple kind of offers and products, like when you're doing affiliate. When affiliates give you your traffic, like with OMG, then you have really two separate, totally separate products and offers. OMG as an affiliate thing that affiliates can get money by promoting is itself like a product, right? Like the commission that they get, the ability to get a commission is our offer to affiliates, and affiliates give us traffic in response for that. That's its own separate thing that we have to build properly. Of course, it's related to the OMG product itself that individual people buy. But in order to snowball, we have to have both right? And they can help each other. But both of those products have to be good. It has to be a good product for affiliates, right? And it has to be a good product for customers. But before you get started, they have to do this first. And so you put all your focus and resource into getting off the ground. Then you create snowball conditions. It's the same thing in a romantic relationship where things can get better and better, right? And basically, you're building your understanding here, right, and so forth. And then, and this is instead of scaling. I'm more interested in snowballing. And what's the difference between scaling and snowballing? Not much, but it's kind of where you're focused, like on the surface or on the foundation. Snowballing, you're getting your foundation. You're focused on building your foundation properly, and then naturally things build off of that. And you might be doing some work as that happens, but the work is naturally builds off your foundation. So you naturally scale up kind of without hardly being able to help it. If you sat and did nothing, then you wouldn't scale up even with a good foundation. But you will find yourself doing the stuff that will scale you up and make you more money if you have good foundations, kind of naturally. So again, the difference between creating snowball conditions, or if I wrote scaling up, is where you're looking. Scaling up, people are often be looking like in that kind of like 120 degrees in front of them, right? Whereas I'm more looking sort of in back of myself, trying to get the foundation and the context right, and then letting the rest build naturally off of that. It's much more effective than just trying to scale up. People constantly implode. They hire employees because that's their template, that's their self-image, that's their norms and standards for what a successful entrepreneur or business person looks like. That might be if that naturally builds off of your foundation. At some point, employees might naturally build or come about or be relevant for OMG. But up until now, they haven't been, and I've had zero. I added more joint venture partners, right? Coaches, whatever you want to call them. I did that by having a foundation in place and then wanting to build and building my foundation better. That actually caused a better foundation by building it. In effect, I'm always kind of expanding in a way that increases my base, right? And then the scaling, the money will naturally increase, and the sales and customers and all that. So that's what I mean by creating snowball conditions is the basic idea of alchemy, where we're focused foundationally instead of just building on kind of nothing and thinking that if we can outrace nothing, we can outrace having no foundation. Is if the 98th floor or the third floor, there's no first, second, or third floor, and then you have a fourth floor, and you think you can just build fast enough for the building not to crumble. That's sort of how people operate when they're just trying to scale up. So get started, keep building the base better and better, and it should naturally scale. And then don't screw up, meaning look for real failure conditions that are going to take you out. Again, don't look to scale in a way where I've seen a number of people, they grow, they're doing well, and then they expand their capacity real hard and fast, which increases their monthly cost tremendously, and then they fail. And that's very common. So when you have some success, just these almost kind of can even go together. Like get started and then focus on the foundation. And now we're back to the relationship thing, right? Get started, have the chemistry, and then work on the context and the foundations, and things that could block you, overcoming blocks and so forth, right? If you're selling, you need to have the vision that gives the motivation that's connected to the person and what they really want and their self-image, presumably, and so forth. And then it's about not having blocks, right? Having a justification, not having blocks, having the rest of the framing and the categories click into place where they naturally buy, right? Growth and purchasing and continuing to consume and purchase can happen naturally as you attend to context and foundations. It's kind of a core idea of alchemy that I think you guys are pretty in tune with at this point. So these are two different ways to look at things. And again, this is just an iteration of compelling vision and justification, or chemistry, and then ability to work through problems with the person that you're in a romantic relationship with. Same thing in business, with business partnerships and relationships. You need ways that you have chemistry with business. Obviously, it's different than romantic, but it's the same type of thing, where it's not just that you guys like each other, and you might not even have to like each other all that much in some ways. In the parallel of that with romance, is you have to like each other with romance, but you don't have to have a lot in common, like on the surface, that you guys like. You don't have to like the same music and so forth. You might not want to go out and get a beer with the person you're working with, but if you complement each other really well in a business sense, then that's terrific. And it can almost be dangerous if you're friends. You have to maintain both a friendship successfully and a business relationship successfully, and it's almost harder. I do that successfully with Mike, but it takes wisdom and a lot of natural chemistry that we have in both with friendship. Like we're both kind of gamers, which really helps, and naturally we just like each other from the beginning, just as people. I had a very easy time liking him. He had an easy time liking me for the most part. But then we had good business chemistry. On the other hand, I had a very close friend from high school that I tried working with, and we totally liked each other, but there just wasn't the business chemistry, and so we just didn't make much progress together business-wise. We just didn't complement each other well, where we had different aspects covered. And you want to make sure you have different aspects covered. You can look at product conversion, traffic. And it's not that they have one thing covered, like, oh, you cover traffic, I cover conversion, some other guy covers product. But somehow where whatever you're kind of lacking when it comes to conversion that the other person helps with, like Mike and myself both work on conversion, and we're both very good in certain aspects of it. And so it would be ridiculous to say David is more important for conversion or Mike is more important for conversion or Mike's better or David's better. We handle different aspects. Mike is particularly good with emails, getting affiliates, being on webinars, marketing, and things like that. He's extremely glib, like off the top of his head, and has a lot of energy and excited energy for things that he's into. Whereas, but writing a sales letter is agonizing for him and could take him a very long time. whereas that's pretty easy for me to write a sales letter. And I'm good at kind of getting the logical, the kind of the storyline good with a good rhythm, good internal logic is a big thing I do with conversion that I haven't really covered, but I've only covered so much, I guess. When I talked about natural versus unnatural in conversion, then internal logic is an example of that. Things that don't conflict in your storyline, right? So I'm very good with that aspect of conversion and things like that. And I only went into that detail to point out that it's not like one person has to do this, one person does that, in terms of just traffic and conversion or product. Greg obviously really took care of the product big time, but Mike helped out. I didn't help out much in the beginning. I helped out a lot with designing it, actually, and framing it and so forth. So you see, but Greg was just critical, obviously, goes without saying. I mean, he was by far lifted and carried that burden for us early on with OMG and still. So that just gives a sense. And then Mike really took care of traffic almost by himself, although I really helped support that in a number of ways. Couldn't have even gotten off the ground whatsoever without him he did most of the lifting for that. But then I was involved with that in a number of ways too. And the point the point isn't to talk about myself there, but to just give you a sense of how it can all work. So you don't get in any kind of straitjacket where this person has to do that, this person has to do this. And if one person's doing two of these things, one person's doing one, it doesn't mean one person's doing twice as much as the other, right? You don't want to be thinking about that in business. If it's all working, that's great. And it could easily be just as much effort or more just to do product versus doing both of these. Or it could be twice as hard to do traffic than both of these combined, just depending on your business and so forth. The bottom line is you have to get them all working together. So you can think in terms of the getting started and then having the foundation and context good without getting blown up is one way to think about importance and what your objective should be. Or you can think in terms of product conversion traffic. There's not like a more right one. They're both great ways to just giving you two different angles. That'll just help you see better. When you can see from multiple perspectives like this, then you can just see better when you have multiple angles. These don't ever conflict, right? They just give you more ability to see what you want to do. I might do a quick check on semi-soft lock, and then I'll come back to the plan A and plan B. I think I'm pretty happy. I talked about happy long-term relationships, sales targets, like when someone's talking about, I want to make 1,000 sales, or I want to make 50 sales, or I want to make this much money, right? That's not a semi-soft lock. That's not a sub-objective of any use. It's kind of almost irrelevant. The only way that a number like that is relevant is it can be, and I even use it, what I'm saying, it can be helpful in giving your mind something tangible to work from. So if you imagine yourself making $100 million, or if you imagine $10,000 a month coming into you, or a lot of money just coming in and flowing through you, but in a good way. I don't mean like you're spending it all necessarily, but just value is flowing through you, whatever. That can help provide sort of the impetus or some sort of clarity for having that your mind can grasp in order to just kind of provide the energy and the motivation. And then you can we're once again in the same pattern of giving your mind a sort of compelling vision, but it's not a target. You see, the battery is not like the objective. And then what you want to do in this case is, so again, you can visualize this thing this target, this like sales target or whatever. These things that I've otherwise said is sort of wrong. You can visualize it to get your mind focused, and then separately, then you think smartly and figure, okay, well, what do I want to actually target? What's my semi-soft lock? And those are two separate things. I wrote taking care of money. That's a little bit, I kind of covered that already. Like instead of a semi-soft lock, people just will get themselves on like a treadmill where they're thinking about making a certain amount of money per month, and then they increase it. It's amazing. People, let's say they hit $10,000 a month. They'll say, okay, now I'm going to go for 20. So they actually made they took themselves farther from their goal. They actually made life harder for themselves. Now, literally life now costs $20,000 for them to be satisfied instead of 10 or less. So they're actually, in essence, making life kind of harder and harder in one sense, and getting farther and farther away from their target, if they think in terms of a target. And then they get themselves on a treadmill, or they have overkill, both. But in neither case did they identify a proper sub-objective and go for it in order to direct resources. The visualization I'm talking about, where you're imagining making a bunch of money or even $100 million, that again can help just provide the overall sense of energy to you. But then it's not focused. There's no strategy yet. There's just energy. And and then we're all about the strategy after that. That's when you do everything I'm talking about. And that's when it all applies. Energy is fine, and then strategy, where do I direct the resources? Now you're looking at building your foundation and not getting blocked, and figuring out the right targets to hit, and so forth. Okay, and the final thing I'll say here is the bottom of this last slide. To the extent that you're going to come up with a plan of action, at the point where you figure out a sub-objective and you're like, all right, well, this is my tentative or general idea of how I'm going to go about it. You can identify a plan or method that you're going to follow. Like, let's say you decide you're going to do 3 webinars for something. Then you don't want to switch to plan B, where you only do 1 webinar or 2 webinars, or even 10 webinars, or where you switch and you just want to do instead write a sales letter or do emails or whatever. If you decide you're going to do 3 webinars, follow through on that, unless there's a clear and compelling new distinction, which is different than feedback. So if you just have a webinar go off and it doesn't go that well or something, and I know that you might not run into this exact problem, but I'm just kind of giving you this as an illustration, then, or what will happen is an opportunity comes up and you want to ditch your plan A because, oh, there's a new opportunity. Follow through on plan A unless there's a clear new distinction, and where in light of that distinction you look at the whole thing from scratch and you definitely, plan B is clearly better. If it just feels like maybe it's better, stick with plan A. If you just have what you think is a distinction but it's just like an opportunity or what looks like feedback that you're not doing so well, and that you can apply the same thing to a romantic relationship, you stick with a person. Unless there's a clear and compelling new distinction, you think about things from scratch, and plan B is definitely better. If it's just maybe better, stick with plan A, follow it through, and just do that. Just follow that advice. You can figure out why it works. Because you can just look at doing the opposite, and it doesn't make sense. You'll just be zipping off in different directions all the time based on incorrect thinking. So new distinction, look at it from scratch. If it's clearly better to do plan B at that point, do plan B. Otherwise, plan A. And you don't need to overplan. So you might think, well, what if I lock myself in place for 3 years doing this? Well, I don't make plans where I'm locked into place for 3 years, right? Unless they were really right. And even then, it would be fine. If I made a plan that was for the next 3 years, and then there was a clear new distinction, that I then thought about things from scratch, and it was no question I wanted to do plan B, or at least, yeah, the difference was so clear that I could clearly see that plan B is better, then I'll do plan B, right? So I'm not locked in anyway. But you're not going to go wrong thinking about things that way, and otherwise it's very normal that people go wrong, and they're always popping around. And so do it that way. Right, and I wrote distinction. You want a compelling new distinction. You can always come up with some reason. Remember, your mind is going to function like a lawyer. It's going to make a case why you should do something else, but not based on wisdom, just based on processing and associations and stuff, and a lot of it from your childhood and all that. So a distinction gives clarity. A reason doesn't give clarity. A reason just makes a case. Like if a lawyer comes to you and tells you something and you know that he's for one side or the other, or if someone comes to you and gives you another reason why you should or shouldn't vote for someone, but you know that they're biased, right? Then it's not that relevant. If they give you a new distinction, then you can look at everything in light of that. And if there's a new clarity and it's no question plan B, all right, do plan B. But remember to look at it from scratch and include all the previous stuff that you were thinking of before. You don't want to just be looking at that new distinction. Obviously, plan B will look better. Like if someone comes to you with an opportunity that looks nifty, right, or a person starts hitting on you when you're dating someone else or you're married to someone else, then obviously if the only thing you're looking at is that new piece of evidence, it's going to look big and important, right? And plan B might look like it's clearly better. You have to stop and make sure you're looking from scratch and remember what was going on when you came up with plan A. And by default, your mind won't do that. It'll mess with you. You'll get it wrong. Okay? So remember all that. Even plan B can be, oh, I no longer like this person, or I no longer respect this person in business. This happens all the time, where just something happened recently, and a person drops the ball on something, and all of a sudden you look at them totally differently. That's plan B. Plan A was you're going to work with them and you're going to respect them, right? Including in your head, and give the benefit of the doubt. So now they do something. Now if you don't look at things from scratch, people automatically, right? Didn't I just illustrate this too? It kind of hits you, right? People think differently about somebody. Well, and then so stop and think all the ways they've been strong, they've benefited you, and their previous weaknesses. And maybe this is just an example of their weakness popping off that you've been aware of the whole time anyway, or that you weren't aware of, but you could have been aware of it, and you now that you see it, you accept it, and you probably always would have accepted it, right? So, and maybe something happened, and you look at it from scratch, and you're like, no, things are really different now. And clearly plan B is right, and I need to not respect this person, and I want to exit working with them as soon as possible. That can happen. But as long as you look at it properly from scratch, and you fully remember and properly weight things that happened in the past, and where you were and what you were thinking of when you came up with plan A. That's a very important thing that's going to affect you constantly with decisions. All right, there's your business meta strategy. Probably going to want to rewatch this and or at least go over notes because I just because of my own presentation, I covered a lot of things that are kind of they're all related in general, but they're different. But of course, I wanted to get this all in there for you. So that is that. Okay, let's talk to each other a bit. Haha, you're in the zone working, Joseph. Glad you remembered. Robbie said, I really got a lot out of the turning over tiles illustration for the client getting two-part series you did. Great. Where based on my current level of attractiveness, there's a fixed amount of people that will be interested in my offer. It gave me a different perspective that is now mixing and seeking greater clarity. You're very welcome. Yeah, everyone should have that client getting series. I put it everywhere that has Alchemy at this point. And I think those are great. Those are great 2 videos. Julie says that's so right. I like these. I like these comments. They're just like, I'm so right. You know, what better? That's so right about how it's counterproductive when people who are trying. I like to joke about self-image stuff, of course, but obviously, if I am right, then it does help to point it out, as long as I actually am. Anyway, that's so right about how it's counterproductive when people who are trying to sell something keep piling on, and you also get this and this and this. Often that puts me off buying a product. Excellent. Exactly, Julie. Great thing to point out. Steve Whitby said, perceived value equals a degree of hope, actual value, a degree of reality in the product or services. Sure, that's a fine angle to look at it. Makes complete sense. Great, great. Like hope, vision, right, and continued. And in some cases, perceived value can kind of, anyway, just kind of confusing. But well, sorry, I was basically just repeating the same exact point. If you don't have enough perceived value, you can just block yourself from, like there could be actual value, but you might not, literally not even benefit from it, but I basically put it that way already. That without the perceived value there, then everyone's going to be blocked from getting the actual value if you don't have perceived value. And remember, actual value can spit out perceived value over time. So they blend together in that one way. Matt said this, wow, I'm getting, I like these comments. Matt said this is incredible, hashtag mind blown. I've always been concerned with delivering value. In my offer, I've been transparent to help align customer pre-arrival expectations with actual product, the hotel, right? I've never made that distinction. Again, this massively assists with a project. Saturday's Webby smashed a bottleneck in. Great. Thank you, David Mills. With your offer, could you make the fact that actual value kicks in later as part of your offer? Absolutely, yeah. Like with search engine optimization is another example. Sorry, I'm trying to think how that occurs to a hotel, and I was thinking of some funny stuff. But anyhow, with SEO, they might not see rankings for several months. They might, but they might not. And so you explain that might kick in later. So for sure, that's important. Mike Long said, yes, it's a lead serum. Tim Schmidt is an inspiration with what he's now done in affiliate marketing. Yeah, absolutely. Tim's great day when he joined OMG. And he spoke at OMG Live, and he'll be speaking, I believe, at OMG Live in Orlando. Everyone needs to come to that. By the way, if you haven't come to it, if you haven't signed up, make sure you at least check it out, seriously. Coming up in a month. George O'Brien, how do you reinforce actual value? I do it by I'm always focused on context and foundations, and then the rest of the value naturally builds on that, right? And when I say I'm focused on context and foundations, as you're building understanding context, as you have a proper foundation for a product, then details will build, and that'll be stuff that you think of, that you do, but you create the space for details, you create the support for them, and then they fill themselves in, either by popping into your mind or someone will provide them or whatever. How do you reinforce actual value for the customer? Would be a different way to interpret that question. That's probably what you meant. Great idea, good point. Right, good idea. So you might think about how the actual value is going to manifest itself and make sure they're seeing that. And again, that's a blending of perceived value and actual value. That's a natural outgrowth of this idea. So in that way, they blend together. But if you're thinking about both, then you'll see how they logically blend together at a certain point. But yeah, if a skin serum makes it so if you pinch, I'm just making this up, this might have nothing to do with skin serum, but if you pinch your skin, there's a different way that it kind of goes back to where it was, and that's a way to see it. Then you can point that out to somebody. Or if you're giving them an update on things that you're doing to build their rankings up, or if you're sending them traffic, and they might not know if you don't point it out in a certain way. So you can think about how to make sure they're seeing perceived value from the actual value. And again, sometimes they might not get the actual value at all if they don't perceive it. Maybe they have to perceive it first in order to reach out and grab the actual value in some way. So the question is, how do I build perceived value for my SEO service? Oh, all sorts of ways. I mean, referrals are an example of perceived value. Ranking sites of your own that they can see is perceived value. Just a story about people that got their sites ranked and they expanded their business, right? Some of our testimonials involve that. Sometimes Mike gives earnings reports where they're also tied into to the client making money and expanding. He sent one of those out recently in the OMJ Way emails. Figuring out a better story, a more compelling and complete story. Remember I talked about framing in terms of a place. I might have said that after you asked this, but that increases perceived value. All the conversion stuff. Make sure you read the book Influence by Robert Cialdini. He'll give a bunch of ways to increase perceived value now that I've given you a good foundation for understanding that even more contextually. Joseph wrote, I use Cotton and David's method of clearly showing the client how much dollar business that their competition is taking away from them by ranking higher. Great, another one. So super, absolutely. But see, when you ask the question, it'll fill itself in with answers in all sorts of ways. Let me just get a drink here of water. Oops. That's when I developed my drinking problem. Little airplane, the movie reference there. Is it that actual value is when the client realizes or receives the benefit of the product or service? Is actual value when they realize or receive the benefit? Basically, I mean, it's something that's actually going to benefit them, presumably in terms of solving the problem or giving them the opportunity, like giving the building block or whatever that they're looking for. So it basically is you can think of any product or service. If you think of a problem as in the general sense, expansive sense of if I want something good, it's now a problem on how do I get there. So that includes like that kind of expands the idea of a problem outside of just getting rid of bad stuff. So if you expand the idea of a problem for I want to get to some goal, either get rid of bad or get to some good, and I want to figure out how to do it, then your product or service is always going to be something that gives an advantage. That advantage might be a total advantage where they get all the way to the solution, or it might be a partial advantage where it gives them something that will help them with the solution. Like let's say someone wants a clean house overall, and you give them a mildew remover. Then the mildew remover will not clean their entire house, but it will be an important thing that will give them an important part of the advantage or piece of the puzzle on the way to solving the whole problem of having a clean house. So an actual value is something that gives an actual building block or partial or full advantage on the way to solving a problem. Yep. However, I think the exact thing I said is kind of perfect. I won't say that all the time, but in that case, I think I captured it there. Sitting on a hill, yep, with a place, right? How do you create a place that represents client SEO? And I think I answered that question a minute after you answered it, probably. Right? Tough crowd tonight. Probably being ironic given all the nice comments. I would imagine an SEO place results. Wow, is the mind blowing up? So I think I basically just answered that after people said it naturally in what I was saying. See, anticipated a little bit. Wow, is the mind blowing up? Oh, great, Jason, excellent. Jason's a great conversion guy and been with us a long time and does a lot of consulting. How you doing, Jason? If you're still there. One of the great encouragements very early on with my law of implication and so forth. Everyone likes to hang out at the results, right? But a place is also where the process happens. I gave you some good examples with Thomas the Train. I went into how you could present your digital marketing agency as a place and so forth. Great transit. Oh, and Amazon too. Right, excellent. OMG is the best. Awesome. Excellent. Michael wrote, I can create value out of a thought in concert with a verbal. All right, mister. I will read your comments happily, but not when you want to twist everyone's brain in circles. And I know that Michael got pleasure out of my comment right there, not pain. Haha, there we go. Adweek.com, Kung Fu Panda. Is that an example of it making it a place? Let me see if I just get someone else's questions. Jen wrote, wow, huge aha moment on how to naturally and powerfully build a scenario and vision using a place. Love it. Excellent. Yeah, I'm really glad I covered that. That worked out great. Jamari said, this is amazing. Looks like this is a good webinar. This is amazing information. It's like you saved the most mind-blowing stuff for the last webbies, David. Didn't mean to, but yeah. This is what happens when there's a foundation. I'm telling you, it's tough. The hardest thing is building the foundation because it's always, although people have been pretty darn happy all along. I appreciate that. And I'm crediting you guys for that at least as much as myself because you guys have had the wisdom and the vision to see even when we're building, or even smashing foundations in order to build a new one. Great. Oh, you heard of skadoosh when I was talking about the 3 Ps. That's great. Using allegories is a good angle. Dave Keys says, David, many of us in client consulting face the challenge of maintaining perceived value during a lengthy wait period. That's right. While the rankings they want come in. Your thoughts on that, please. My niche is particularly subject to long wait page. Competitors never stop, and a page 1 ranking could take 6 and often 12 months. Cotton, of course, prepares them for that. One of the biggest things is to prepare them ahead of time, and I agree that even if you prepare someone ahead of time, they can still hear something different, and I've experienced that in my own stuff, like with our Business in a Box program where we tried doing some websites for people that Greg would rank. Then no matter what we said we were doing, then people still expected a certain other thing, and so we dropped that. Even if we were fulfilling what we were doing, it's still just very hard. So you do your best there, and then you can start to get out of the box more and take a look at paid ads and social, using social stuff to get traffic to them. Start looking at other ways to get traffic during that time, perhaps. I'm not saying that'll solve things. Sometimes you have to poke around. but of course you can update them in your progress. So, and I would just combine those things. Again, I'm always looking to contextualize, right, in various ways and to break out of the context and assumptions I have and to add more context that can help. So, but yeah, I would start looking at other ways to add traffic and not just be a taxi driver as Cotton talks about it. That can work for the things that Cotton does, but in your niche, presumably with real estate and stuff, then I would look to broaden in terms of your traffic sources. And I understand they can be expensive or whatever, but still there's going to be ways if you keep looking to broaden traffic sources. Hell, if it's all local, you can look to put up flyers around. I'm always a believer in physical flyers as a potential thing. They're so cheap and easy to do. How do you know which target is a 90 to 100% chance to hit? You kind of eyeball it, but you just you'll be able to. I mean, if you think, all right, like for example, ranking a website or a YouTube video for a medium type of tail keyword or term, that'll give you experience, it'll give you confidence, it'll give you evidence, and so forth. And you can get a sense of if you can hit it. And the other thing is, if you try to eyeball it and get it wrong, remember I tell you, reframe everything ultimately as you're seeking understanding, right? At some point when you're just trying to understand things, it'll be really obvious how to just go do something, and then you'll do that. So you're never going to have a problem taking action if you're framing things as understanding. But suppose you get it wrong and you're trying to hit a target and you realize, wait a second, I have a new distinction based on doing stuff. And I realize I want to go after a different target, either easier or even maybe bigger. And I'm going to do that, like the plan A, plan B idea. This process is brilliant. Thank you, Mr. Mills. Well, you're very welcome. Thank you, Michael. That one gets read for sure. That's funny. 90 to 100% chance, not terms that compete with Zillow. Nice. Okay, I want to read all those. Bryce said motivation is the key to much success. Right, well, again, like I talked about, right, you need to plug into the battery, like motivation, and then you need to have the good strategy after that. But you're not going to have the motivation even to come up with a good strategy unless you have the motivation. So the motivation's fine, and that's why I talk about you can visualize whatever floats your boat your brain's boat, so to speak, in order to get the battery going, the energy going, the motivation going. And then you apply the strategy I talked about. So once again, I want to reinforce not getting confused when I talk about visualizing something compelling. That's totally different than strategy. Strategy is kind of like what you do after that. But although you can look at meta strategy as that you do that, right? That you visualize something compelling, you get the battery plugged in or get plugged into the battery, and then you what to do after that as well. So there's always meta strategy and meta strategy. So you could call it all strategy if you want. I don't really have much, and Bryce goes on to write, I don't really have much talent nor merit besides school and running. But one thing that has gotten me to succeed in things is persistence. I strongly advise reading biography books for inspiration. Right, biography books will often reinforce persistence. Let me point out that persistence will only help you climb the local peak that you're on, unless the persistence is directed towards understanding itself, in which case you're always going to be fine. Being persistent regarding understanding will always win. That's why I say always seek understanding. That's where you want to be persistent about, basically. And then the other stories about persistence are going to be kind of like the Frogger thing, where if you interview the frogs that got across the road, then they're going to say, I did it by being persistent. But then other frogs got run over. So if you're persistent with understanding, then you'll know what to more specifically be persistent about. And remember the plan A, plan B thing. That's another way to understand persistence. Be persistent with plan A unless you have a new distinction that after you start from scratch looking at things, then clearly want to do plan B instead. So between the plan A, plan B thing and the seeking understanding idea, then you can, and the Frogger idea, you can have a good sense of what persistence is, how to use it right, and how to be trapped by it. Persistence is like one of those clusters I talk about, like berries, where you want to get the good without the bad. You don't throw the whole thing out, but you also want to watch it because it's not fully correct in and of itself. Joseph said, and that's the result of a hell of a lot of thinking about that. That might sound like it's nice and pat, but that's because I worked on that for years and years in various ways and various contexts. And I would have the question that I would discover something separate, but it would provide context for understanding persistence better and what's right and what's wrong about it. Like like with faith. And then faithfulness I look at as like really what faith is faithfulness with seeking understanding. It's kind of persistence combined with understanding, or seeking understanding you might think of as faith or faithfulness on one angle on it. Like I said, like having the faith that there is the right path, that you can find the right things if you focus on seeking it, rather than that you're already on the right path. Joseph said, build trust. I came right out and told client to be that our process that he and I would need to follow to win starts with trust and communication. I put him on the spot with a soft lock in a way. I told him, right, maybe you went for a little bit too extra and maybe you hit it, but then that gets addicting, and so you want to think in terms of hitting semi-soft lock targets consistently, and then instead of going for necessarily too much at once. Again, it can sometimes work, but it can also, you can fall on your face, and sometimes you can fall on your face in a way that's really counterproductive. Of course, if there's a target you would hit 50% of the time, or even 20%, and it was just a numbers game, then that in and of itself could be a semi-soft lock where you're always going to, if for example, even 1% of women would, or 1 out of even, whatever, depending on where you're looking, 100, 1 out of 100 or 1 out of 1,000 online or whatever, would be great to find, then it's a semi-soft lock just to keep going through them until you find it, right? So something like that can be a semi-soft lock. Or if you had a 20% chance of getting a client in a certain pool of potential clients, then it's a semi-soft lock to just keep on meeting with those until you got one, right? You just wouldn't get attached to getting a particular one, but you'd understand. You keep going until you get one, and in and of itself, that situation is a semi-soft lock. I put him on the spot in a soft lock way. I told him to think about the requirements and tell me at 1 p.m. today if he knows he can commit to trust and communication. He called and retained me for $300 an hour for a consultation at 5-hour minimum. I do not believe I could have done that without Alchemy, and of course our other fine coaches helped me understand the product of SEO as well. I have a man crush on you, David. That's awesome, Joseph. I'm so proud of you. That's a wonderful success story. And another earnings report for us. That's terrific. We love it. Got something for an email, Mike? You guys can have as many platonic crushes on me as you want. Only will help us learn more together. And help other people, right? You guys are great. In addition, all that you guys do with me, it really helps other people as well, because the questions you ask can get answers and stuck for posterity on these recordings. The reinforcement and the kind of praise or calling out good points helps other people pay attention and learn as well, and it's just great. And if when I am on the right track, you helping me to know it is only, or at least have a good indication of it. Maybe I won't know it perfectly just because people say so, but help indicate, then that only helps too. Matt says, I might be able to firm it up with re-listening to the past 2 webinars and reviewing my notes on contextualizing an offer, but could you clarify contextualization with an example using context? Maybe contextualization would be the final. I might be able to do that in the future. I'll try to remember to take a look at this and give it some thought. Mike said, yeah, I really don't like sales letter writing when I mentioned that in the webinar before. Britt says, as far as plan A and plan B, what if you are looking to tweak something with your existing plan? For example, I have a product, but I'm looking to change the demo and target moms because I'm a new mom and I feel like, well, even with tweaking something, if you're basically changing the plan and you're not following through with the original plan, then just do what I said. Given a new distinction, which you have, look at things from scratch. Remember why you originally had the plan A that you had without the tweak. Give equal weight to ideas that are more in the past, right? Because your mind won't by default. It'll give more weight to the new stuff. Make sure you're giving equal weight to like past stuff and contextual stuff. And then given that, and that can only take a minute or two. Like It might sound like it has to take like hours or something, but but just make sure you stop and do that, and then if the tweak makes sense, then do the tweak. But in essence, a tweak is still a plan B. But you have the method for deciding on plan B isn't overly burdensome. It just might look so. But by what I just explained, I think you'll be fine. Would it break momentum? Oh, well, good. Well, you'll answer your own question about whether it'll break momentum that you've created with your current audience. Remember, just take that all into account and then decide if you want to do plan B or if you want to follow through on plan A and then do a new plan next that has that additional thing or only that thing, or you might ask all sorts of different questions. If you stick with plan A, sometimes you can do another plan A in another context, right? You can create a separate space and put a new plan in that new space. For example, a sublist. You could say, you could be following through with your current plan and you could say, hey, I'm a new mom. I have something where I'll be talking specifically to new moms particularly, and enter your email here to be on that sublist where I'll be talking specifically to new moms about this new product. You know, for that may or may not apply to you, but that's an example of a new space for a new plan, potentially. Or you can fully discard the old plan and put the new plan B with the tweak in it in its place. And Mike, yeah, Greg is such a rock and so skillful and transparent that he's always helped a lot with marketing, right, with conversion for sure, webinars and such. Agree. Plan A to stick with plan B. Plan B, read plan A. Love it. Matt says, thank you, David Mills. This really helps me focus on my Amazon plan A instead of distraction of opportunity that's taking me in another direction. Good, as long as that's correct, right? Just make sure that you're doing the whole thing I said. Make sure that you are, plan B is fine. I go sideways plenty. I do plan Bs plenty often, but I make sure I do that process first. That's all I'm saying. Don't always confuse. Sometimes things can help give you a greater context and improve your understanding. There's some stuff that you might learn about YouTube video ranking that can really help you with Amazon, and at first you might even apply it to like an affiliate offer, but then you can realize by that experience how it applies to Amazon. Good. So it's not, I'm not saying you should do that, but people can get a little bit overly into this idea of focusing, and think in terms of aligning and creating spaces for things, quarantining. You could have an hour 3 times a week where you're doing non-Amazon stuff and it's quarantined, and then you can see how that goes for a while. You know, and that could be a separate, you know, plan A for doing that. So you, again, quarantining, opening up new spaces, aligning goals together, instead of just thinking that everything's a distraction. Some things are distractions, but I want to give you options. Wow, that was great. Excellent. Not sure what it was, but whatever was 25 minutes ago now was great. Mind blown. Wonder what I said. Must have been good. Oh, it was during my monologue still, so it was at the end. It must have been plan B. Must have been plan A and plan B. Yeah, okay. Yep, plan A and plan B. Terrific. I agree. That was important. That was great. Megan's said, or maybe it was about the compelling vision. Megan said, David, I really love the idea of a compelling vision, a place, person, and process. First time to see it this way so clearly. Very useful raw material to build the conversion piece. Excellent. I'm so glad. I'm so proud of you for getting your lawyer man to sell for you, and the way you're presenting yourself is, that's great. You like the perceived value in addition to the actual value. Thanks, Joseph. David, where's the client getting videos? If you're in Project A, I think I put them in Conversion 101. I think I put them in 2 places. I think I put them in the Law of Implication section, but I also think I put them in Conversion 101. But if not, I would have put them in the Law of Implication section. But they're in all the membership areas, and they can only be in but so many places. Either it'll be about conversion or client getting or my Law of Implication stuff. Chris says, you mentioned after the first hour you want to find a target that you can definitely hit and then go for bigger targets. Can you expand on this as it relates to launching products and services? Sure. I mean, while you're building the product itself, then you are making it, you can probably find something where once you get there, the product will inevitably get finished building if you're competent from there. And you might already be there. And then you finish that up. And then that might itself could be a semi-soft lock on the way to doing the whole launch. And then with the launch, you might think, okay, can I email my own list if I have an email list? And make some sales to get started? Can I get one affiliate to promote over time? Doing a whole launch at once is generally like kind of like a soft lock, but I reframe it generally into a semi-soft lock by making it so that I can pretty much I make kind of a fail-safe worst case-ish thing for a launch where we're pretty much going to be okay. We're going to hit that at this point in my life. I can make sure to do that. When you're getting started, you can probably do the semi-soft lock thing while you're getting started, but don't overly obsess about the semi-soft. Like what I mean is, when you're getting started, you might need to go after some things that you might not hit well, but you can reframe that in terms of building understanding, which you'll get 100%. So worst case, and it's not a bad case. When I say worst case, it's still a pretty great case. You can, for 100%, whatever you go for, you can go for the understanding part of it, and then that turns into a semi-soft lock that's going to be 100%, and you can build from there. Wonderful, Alicia. You're looking forward to OMG Live? Wonderful. And I am too. I'd love to see as many of you there as possible. Beautiful, Jamari. Right, where you didn't get the client. You went in with confidence, but came up short because you lacked the competence of you probably describing process and so forth. My offer wasn't up to par. It was at that point I realized what I had to do. One word, build. I must use the raw materials given here to build a strong foundation. That way I'll stop chasing clients and they will seek me out like how Greg Morrison got his first client. Totally. And you can do like a little, I like to do kind of that half chase, this kind of shingle thing where I kind of, you get in places where you can kind of let it be known and then or let yourself get it out there in a way where people can at least do kind of the next step of reaching you in some way, or kind of you might contact them, but then they reciprocate, and then that kind of builds from there, the worst case. Of course, ideally, people will just knock down your door. That'll be great, too. Everything else will fall into place once I build properly. I'm very thankful and grateful for what you do for us, David Mills. You're very welcome, Jamari. And absolutely, with what you're talking about, you'll have inevitable success, for sure. I just had a breakthrough while watching. In Australia, 9,000 per month killed themselves. I looked up suicide, and there were a couple of EMDs available. My mind automatically looked at the topic of ranking a help site. The notion of competition is out the window from the start because the problem exists. I can now see just how to look at business and winning, especially when looking outside money-making endeavors. Cool. Excellent. Especially for men with the competition, right? Absolutely, in military. Mike said, for the perceived value, think OMG Cloud Rank for getting clients. Right. The way that you can rank videos with the Cloud Rank, if you're an OMG, and there's it's amazing with the 1 penny for the month and so forth, the first month. It's a great way to get to the semi-soft lock, getting in the door. Awesome. Yeah, don't overthink the semi-soft lock thing. Even with you'll probably understand it more as you just try to apply it within reason. I would explain things even more. I mean, I took a second time and explained it today, but I think with what I've said, just go and apply it. And then just use kind of logic and let it reveal more from there, and it'll be fine. It's not some super specific crazy idea in my head where you have to get so many details. It's not really tricky idea. The main thing is just realizing how people kind of don't set themselves up for failure, where it's like they're trying to hit something that they don't have a perfect chance of hitting, and they're putting all their marbles on it, psychologically or somehow. You know what I mean? And just watch out for that, because you can always reframe to understanding, right, for your goal, and you can always hit that 100%. And then as you do that, more tangible objectives will reveal themselves that you can hit 100% too, like ranking the YouTube video for something. Or going to a networking event and just talking to somebody. Or looking for a connector, right? And not necessarily finding them at the first event, but eventually you'll find a connector pretty fast. They're the easiest ones to find at events. That's a semi-soft lock. You just identify one. Once you identify one, you can get good at building relationships with them next. That's the next semi-soft lock. That kind of thing. Like I talked about in the traffic one about offer around 24, 25. Yeah, Cloud Rank is amazing. Yeah. Yeah, I just mentioned influence. Yeah, exactly. It's kind of the iconic book on like ingredients that can help with conversion. Robert Cialdini. Yep, as long as it's Robert Cialdini, you got it. I don't know. I don't even know where my copy is actually, but I read through it. I mean, a lot of it. Anyway. Oh, and Persuasion. Sure, you can read that too. Great. And probably that sounds like he's focused on context a bit or a lot, and people are going to constantly rediscover or discover that focusing on context is even more effective than focusing not on context and foundations. So every time someone gets more foundational, they'll treat it like a revelation to do so. Yep. Is it? Yes. Who's? Yep. That's not quite his name. I'm just trying to think exactly. Is it on the top here? Jordan Belfort is his name that's speaking. Wolf of Wall Street. All right. Megan wrote, and the distinction of perceived value and actual value is two different things entirely to build and tend to. So many clear distinctions in this class. I assume, yeah, like this webinar. Your method of teaching is a perfect example of building as well as it makes it easy to apply in the real world. Essentials, no frills. I appreciate that very much. Haha. Very nice, Mike. Congratulations. I was already down here. Thank you, David. Right, Susanna. I like the Thomas the Train example. Had a lot of Thomas products in my house. Yeah. Me too now. Thank you, David Mills, for your ideas, wisdom, and knowledge. You are the best. Grateful to find OMG. Excellent. I appreciate that very much. Another awesome lesson tonight. You're very welcome. Gold bars. Great night. Looks like we're wrapping up here. Great night for a mind-blowing Webby. Too bad that I have to wait for school break to fully analyze Alchemy and really build SEO. It's all good. It's all inevitable. You'll be way ahead in chronological years of the rest of us, Bryce, for the most part. Melissa said, with these thoughts in mind, would you recommend following all of the opportunities presented in this OMG course until you find passion and momentum with one, or pick one for the get-go? I would go broad for the beginning. I wouldn't go narrow from the beginning unless you really feel like you have a good sense, for sure. But if you're not sure, I would go broad. And then how do you know when you're spreading your focus too thin to accomplish much? When you're going for understanding, it's not really, there's a difference between like getting paralyzed learning. If you're building understanding, you're going to naturally take action. And as you take action, it'll reveal itself where to focus. And then you go for the semi-soft locks and you build from there. Like, you come up with objectives. Have a clear idea of what your kind of overall idea with money that you're trying to build things for is. Like I talked about with the stable base and such. And then you're trying to get a foothold and build from there. I wouldn't worry too much. If it's like 4 months and all you want to do is hear about the next best thing, then yeah, pick something and start building. But if the whole way through, if you're building, you're taking action, you're making some web properties, you're doing all the various different things. It's great if someone goes to Amazon Apprentice, sells some things on a listing, makes different social properties for whatever pretense or business or niche, ranks a YouTube video or more and tries some affiliate marketing, that's great. It's all everything in OMG and in a particular product like Spec Ops or NHP. It's all about the same thing. It's ultimately vectored in the same direction. It's all going to help understand itself. You're going to understand the idea of business with profit, traffic, and conversion. You're going to understand web traffic itself. You're going to understand just the infrastructure of building things on the internet. You're going to have similar types of tech issues or tech knowledge that's going to come up in various angles over and over again. The idea of search engines and again, and specifically you'll learn more about conversion and how to present yourself. So it all builds in the same direction, and that's on purpose. I wouldn't worry too much or overthink it. My family is it's almost like, sorry, I had one other thought. This idea of focusing is a little bit like action bias. There's almost like a focus bias that people kind of develop where they're afraid of not taking action. Action bias is the idea that taking action is like better than like learning or thinking accurately. You just don't want to be thinking inaccurately. You don't want to just be sitting there stuck, right? And if you're not taking action, like building understanding, that's why it's such a great way to look at things, because half of understanding, half of it should be like doing something, taking action, right? And then you're going to avoid being paralyzed, because even if you go and put yourself out there a little bit, try to do something where there's a risk of like failure to some degree, then you realize you can build understanding, so there actually isn't a risk of failure because you're going to build understanding. Richard wrote, my family is afraid of the internet. I would like to build a website and help my family find a new client, but I think they're afraid of the internet and bad people. But I think they're afraid of the internet and bad people will find them. Yeah, I just wouldn't go that route. I would go a different route. Why start with a vector against you? Just find, it's like trying to date somebody who just isn't that into you and then asking what you're supposed to say to them or how you're supposed to get them to do this or what they mean by that. Start with someone where it's going to add to your energy and vector in the right direction. And then that builds context for your family, and maybe they'll get over it, maybe they'll never get over it. And apparently they're already feeding themselves, and they wouldn't be worried about bad people finding them, right? So, so that's that. Great question. I'm glad you asked. Shema wrote, I found the law of implication client getting 2 videos under conversion 101 in the conversion framework 101 and OMG 101 and Project A. Yeah, thanks. Someone asked where that was. George O'Brien asked. So glad you explained the semi-soft lock again. I missed it the first time around. Really good explanation today. Thank you. You're very welcome, Shema. For some reason, Dave's thing isn't showing up. Good night. Good night, Michael. Oh, great. Good night. You're very welcome for explaining semi-soft lock. What can I do to understand? So let me see if I can give a final example of semi-soft lock. What is it related to? Videos. Okay, so yeah, in relating it to videos, let's suppose that you want to monetize the idea by you want to monetize in one of 2 ways. You want to make some money directly by doing like an affiliate, something with an affiliate offer, where you're selling a product or service to someone else's and they give you a commission. Or let's suppose you want to get some money from a client, like a business person, for creating and ranking some YouTube videos for them. Then, so your objective, you've kind of made a sub-objective, which is to get a client and have them pay you, let's say. A semi-soft lock might be, you ask yourself, what's an objective that I can like quite certainly hit, where if I build from there, if I'm competent after that, I'll inevitably succeed with that larger, more objective where I get like a payoff objective of a client hiring me or paying me, doing a contract with me. And then that semi-soft lock might be, look, I can make a video and rank it for a medium term. And then because if I'm competent from there, then I'll end up getting a client to pay me because I can rank some more videos. I can learn some more about getting web traffic from that. I can do do things like that, and then more semi-soft locks on the way, or more sub-objectives on the way. At some point, I'll build my confidence. I'll build my expertise, and then I'll do things to help get myself in contact with potential clients. I'll learn more about that, and I'll get one. But it'll all start with something I can definitely hit, which is ranking my first video. And then it's kind of inevitable from there. So what you're doing is you're kind of thinking of a process of competence. So if you're having any trouble understanding semi-soft locks at this point, you want to think about, you can think of two things. A general process of competence, like I just gave an example of, combined with an objective that you can most certainly hit, which is either like something like ranking a video or whatever, or it can be doing whatever, and then you gain understanding from whatever you did. Even if you failed for the supposed objective of what you tried to do, you gained understanding, and in that way it's a semi-soft lock. So hopefully that further explains. No, you're very welcome. Shirley, who says, I always appreciate this special alchemy time with David. Thank you. You're very welcome. You're very welcome, Irene and Yukila, who wrote great insight. Thank David. You're welcome, Alyssa, who wrote, thank you for these lessons, David. I have to catch up on these lessons, especially thank you for the replays. For sure. And then watch them again, too. Probably want to watch these at least 2 or 3 times, if not 7. Thank you, David. You're very welcome. Jennifer. Scott said, any suggestions for getting past procrastination, videos, OMG books, etc.? I've talked about procrastination before. I'll try to work it into the 29th one when I talk about goals and the mind. It's kind of a wrap-up on goals and the mind, and I'll try to do a wrap-up on procrastination there. But it's basically a matter of priorities will really help, and decluttering will really help. Thank you so much, David. And I don't know, and I probably haven't labeled where I talked about it, unless I maybe did, but I have talked about it. If you watch through the Alchemies, that I know that's a lot of time, but you'll get other great stuff, and presumably you'll want to do that. Then I do talk about procrastination. Megan said, thank you so much, David. If all I concentrate on in OMG is learning and applying alchemy, it's going to build a great life. Excellent. Exactly right. And then you'll naturally use the rest of OMG for sure, as you already are, because I know you are working with a client that's a connector. Also, depending on what membership area, I might try to bring this in, but I made a guest appearance on one of Joe's webinars, and I talked for an hour, generally talk about time management, but a good about it was actually procrastination. Pete said, thanks a lot, David. It truly feels like we advanced years as entrepreneurs with just tonight's webbing. Oh, that's terrific. Mind blown and forever thankful. You're so welcome, Pete. Shema said, would breakthrough stacking be a series of semi-soft locks? Basically, yes, Shema, that's correct. Brian said, OMG is a spectacular place, the city on a hill. Thanks, David and Mike. David, a nice graphic. Love it. I love you, David Mills. Love you too, Julie. That's awesome. You're terrific. You've been so helpful from day one with Alchemy. Matt said, thanks, David. One day I'll invent a new word that captures my gratitude more fully. Like, super amazed. You the bomb. Thanks. That's great. Or 10 million. Hashtag 10 million. I appreciate that. Thanks to all you're participating too. Super amazed. You the bomb. Thanks. 10 million. I like that. That's a great one. New hashtag there, Mike. Rebecca Holman said, semi-soft locks from Magic Star City games. Oh, that's so funny. Great, because I wrote that, the part, basically, the part that I clearly wrote, I wrote. He basically kept everything that I wrote and then just wrote some examples over it with our old Magic thing. Mike gave him permission to do that. We gave him permission to do that. That's so cool. Yeah. It talks about semi-soft locks. You're awesome. Great detective work there. If you want, you can pick that book up. I wrote the beginning of each, or the first half of each chapter. And then Rebecca pulled a quote out of there. If it's referring to specific Magic cards, probably that's what Patrick wrote, which can be helpful if you know Magic. James wrote, thanks again, David. I'm going through all the offer videos again as a priority. Yeah, super, great. From like 23 onward, I think. Looking forward to Alchemy 27, which I hadn't had a chance to watch yet. Excellent. That is wonderful. Yeah, Mike seemed to like it when he watched it recently. And other people did. Deborah says, thank you for another amazing Alchemy, David. The narrowing down of our offer plus only one unique feature. Right, remember that one from the beginning of the webinar. Is very, very helpful to me. Making certain to include both perceived and actual value is so crucial for me to reinforce in my head. I often feel I have not found the one angle that makes my offer truly unique. And remember, you don't need to be truly unique. You just need to kind of have you only need to be unique compared to that archetype, like a competent archetype of someone that does what you do, compared to that, you have an extra thing going for you. Don't worry about being like unique in the world or something like that. I've often not found the one angle that makes my offer truly unique with enough perceived value over my competition in the area who have been doing website design and SEO for a much longer period. I cannot yet point to years of experience in this field. But great, you just asked that question. There's your semi-soft lock for getting the answer. Once I discovered that fundamentally in life, that if I just asked the question, I was going to succeed. Remember, semi-soft lock plus a method of competence, right? The method of competence for answering questions is you keep building on what you know until the answer fills itself in, rather than feeling like you're also already supposed to get the answer. So you identify an objective that will give you an advantage on the way to your final payoff objective, and you combine that with a plan for competence, which is absolutely described in Alchemy over and over from angle after angle. Basically seeking understanding and building on what you know in various ways and adapted to various niches and problems and areas of life. Building blocks, breaking through bottlenecks, breakthrough stacking, all of that. This Alchemy really helped me with the soft lock concept. These soft locks are what I'm focusing on right now. Great. So soft locks combined with the basic idea of Alchemy, which is the method for competence, basically, right? You keep building, is another way to put it. Megan Lee says, and having one flaw that I talked about, I believe, last time, works like magic. Mine with a connector was I'm not well connected locally, so your help with this is more valuable to me now as I build a business It's more valuable than money. Right, exactly. You like lowered your price to zero, basically, but you had to come up with a reason for that, which is like a flaw, and it all works together well. Right? You always need a justification for reducing your price, and generally that's going to involve a flaw, but that they can understand. That's not going to reduce the value for them. Yes. Man and lady crushes flying everywhere. Cody says, yeah, it usually takes me a few times of replay to understand replays are a must. Alchemy is really remarkable for me. Never experienced such an amazing mind-altering experience. Excellent. I'm now right up there with LSD. I totally appreciate it, Cody. That's a terrific statement. Rick says, thank you, David. This is exactly what we need. Such useful training for us right now. But we had to build the foundation, in essence. I mean, theoretically, I could have given this webinar, but it didn't necessarily occur to me either, by the way. I had to build myself, to explain this stuff or to know how to explain it and what to say. All actionable items to give us an amazing advantage in our business and life, most importantly. Gabriella says, thanks, David. I get semi-soft lock now. Wonderful. But it confused me when you said it's like breakthrough stacking. What's that? Yeah, I have a series of videos, and it's not in Spec Ops. I don't know whether I'm going to put it in there or not. It's in No Holds Barred. I did it last year. Thank you, David. You're the coolest alchemist I know. Hey, I don't want to be in competition with you guys. You guys are pretty damn cool. But, of course, I appreciate it, Joseph. Thank you. Suzanne said, thank you again. My mind is in triple overtime with your new way of thinking. It's quite amazing. I'm so excited in the future. Yeah, we were planning on I was planning out the different times that different speakers would speak about OMG Live, and I said I better go at night because I don't, I tend to get people's minds racing, and so better for you guys not to be able to sleep that night. Saturday, I'll probably speak on Saturday, or I will probably or certainly at night on Saturday. But yeah, but I might lose some sleep, but. Or at least be a good dinner topic, but then at least mine won't be kind of racing about that stuff while listening to Jordan or anyone. So that's the plan. Triple overtime, excellent, quite amazing. I'm so excited for the future. Pedro said, thank you. David Mills, you're very welcome. Yeah, Mike, thank you. Incredible event. Absolutely marvelous. Kyle said, thank you, David. You're very welcome, John and Kyle. And George, yeah, I wish I was hearing this when I was 25, now 65. Amen to that. You're in the right place, Dean, absolutely. Better late than never, for sure. Good night. Timothy Leary, great with LSD. 10 million, all right, another 10 million. Super, guys. All right, I'll wrap up here. And wonderful. And I will see you next week when we'll do a nice wrap-up. I said maybe I wouldn't have mind blowns, but it looked like it worked out well anyway today. And then same thing for the next two. Might be extra good, might be, you've heard it all before as a wrap-up, but either way, we'll do them. Number 29 and 30, I'll do a wrap-up with mind and goals, and I'll be thinking about that during the week, kind of how to wrap it up best. And then on the number 30, I'll do a wrap up with kind of the core idea about seeking understanding, the method of knowing what's true and thinking accurately and so forth. You're very welcome, Ernie and Michael and Gilad and Rebecca. Can I really wrap up something so eternal? Yeah, exactly. I won't really wrap it up, but I will do a temporary not arbitrage. What's the word? Someone knows it. Triage. Temporary triage. Maybe I'll call it instead of wrapping it up. For next week as best I can until we talk next time. Excellent. You're very welcome, Susanna, and you're very welcome, Jen. Excellent. Thanks again for your awesome testimony on that original Alchemy marketing webinar. And I'm glad you're still here with us. Still fulfilled your expectations, it seems, so that's perfect. Wonderful, guys. Oh, a new Snoopy one. I like that one. Okay, I will wrap up here. Excellent. With the triage, Sue, is that what you mean? That's awesome. Appreciate that, Sue. All right. I will exit, and we're good.